All right, and welcome, good afternoon and welcome
Evan?
that was a dry run. That was just a 2021 dry run. We'll do this again in terms of good afternoon and welcome to the regular meeting of Council and General Committee for Monday, January 18th, 2021. Before we start the proceedings, I will turn it over to the Clerk Administrator Extraordinaire, Evan McGinty, to play O Canada.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Carton bras et porter le pays, il sait porter la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
All right, such a beautiful rendition of O Canada. We begin this gathering by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada's treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Acknowledging this reminds us of a great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank Carl Dockstetter and congratulate him on his new position with the Niagara Region Native Center. I had an opportunity last week with our CAO, Shelley Chemnitz, and our Deputy CAO, Dave Oakes, and Scott Ross in my office, as well as Carl Dockstetter, to talk about his position and what his hopes are for the relationship between the City of St. Catharines and the Niagara Region Native Center. We reviewed the memorandum of understanding that was signed in 2017 as a means to understand the path that we've taken thus far and also remind ourselves that the journey that we're taking is going to be much longer than just a few years. And so Carl's looking forward to the relationship along with his board of directors. And I assured him that our council is working really hard on walking down this path of truth and reconciliation with our Indigenous brothers and sisters. As we heard last week, the Premier has declared a stay-at-home order for the province of Ontario, and this is in effect until at least February 10th. It is unfortunate that we have to be in this position, but the cases that are rising, not just here, but across the province, are alarming. And here in Niagara, we're seeing we're at a crisis point as both the long-term care facilities and the healthcare facilities in our community are becoming overwhelmed. We're hearing from our frontline staff and the challenges that we're facing. We're seeing the increased cases are presenting a significant caseload in terms of the cases going to the hospitals. And it's at a position where the second wave is actually larger and more impactful than the first wave. So the Premier's direction of stay at home and only go out for essential items. And essential items include healthcare if you have to go to an appointment, if you have to go out and get food, things like that. It's important to limit your contact with those in the community. And really what the healthcare professionals and the public health have been saying is it's about breaking the transmission of COVID-19. So if we limit our contact with those outside of our household, we're limiting the ability for the virus to further contract into the community. It's a very simple thing to do in terms of break the chain, but it's a very difficult thing for people in our community to achieve because there's a lot more challenges than just literally staying at home. So we understand those challenges, and we just want to remind the community that if we work together on this and we do it as a group, do it as a community, you'll start to see the numbers go down. And just like we saw in the spring, the easing of restrictions will take place. The light at the end of the tunnel that we have now is that there is a vaccine. And we saw last week the first shipment of vaccines arrive in Niagara. And as of Sunday evening, Niagara Health was reporting more than 2,800 high-risk healthcare workers and long-term care residents in the region have been vaccinated. This is amazing news. And over the 3-week period, the goal of Niagara's COVID-19 vaccination plan is to immunize 11,000 people here in Niagara. This doesn't come without concern, and we are concerned by what we're seeing with the delays now in Pfizer and with the shifting of allocations to from Moderna to other parts of Ontario. And I can assure you that Chair Bradley, myself, the mayors of Niagara, and a number of elected officials, including many of you here today, have spoken out on social media. And I encourage you to continue to do that. It's not about pointing fingers, but it's about making sure Niagara is going to get its fair share of the vaccines as quickly as possible. We have one of the highest infection rates now here in Niagara in an older, vulnerable population, and that justifies why we should be getting the access to vaccinations that other high-risk areas are getting. And so I have been in contact with our local area MPPs. I know St. Catharines MPP, Jenny Stevens, is very vocal about making sure that we get access to it. I also know that Sam Oosterhoff, who I'm MPP in Niagara West, I've been in touch with as well, just again, reinforcing the position that we need access for our vulnerable communities, just like any other community that's in a high-risk area, and we are in a high-risk area. So we're going to continue to advocate very loudly, and I just want to again thank Dr. Hergy. I want to thank our President, CEO of Niagara Health, Lynn Guerrero, as well as Regional Chair Jim Bradley, who's set up a task force for the vaccination strategy as it unrolls here in Niagara. I think he's taken a leadership role in the establishment of that task force. The task force will include other members of our community, including EMS, Niagara Regional Police, social agencies that are dealing with very vulnerable populations, and the school boards of Brock University and Niagara College, because there is obviously students that are in our community, but there's also going to be more students coming into our community in the coming months. So that is a very important strategy that Chair Bradley has taken. So just wanted to touch on that. And our CAO, Shelley Chemnitz, will be talking about COVID as it relates to the city. She has a lot of important updates of which you'll be able to, as council, will be able to ask a number of questions. I also want to start by thanking the volunteers who have stepped up here in our community here in St. Catharines. And this is on a different issue, but it talks to volunteerism. What we saw last week is there was some bullying of our volunteers in our community on the Heritage Committee. And I just want to say that that shouldn't take place on any committee. There's no place in our community for harassment of volunteers, for the harassment of committee members who are doing the work for our city, I believe, in a very procedural and just way. And I just want to say to the Heritage Committee members and Brian Narhi, who is an absolute resource for our community, that we have your back 110% when it comes to volunteers in our community. So wanted to say that. And I also wanted to extend our condolences to Maurice Gum, who passed away last week. And on behalf of the City Council, Maurice was a longtime Rotarian, and he believed in the motto service above self. I've known him for many, many years. He won the Paul Harris Fellowship recipient 3 times. He was a former warden for St. Thomas Anglican Church here in downtown St. Catharines, and he was also past president of the St. Catharines Chamber of Commerce. And he was recognized by Pathstone Children's Mental Health with their signature award, the Hope Award, in 2012. For those of you who are wondering about the naming of our streets, he also took the time to author a book called The Street Names of St. Catharines, and that was published about 3 years ago. He spent many, many years helping our community. And while we can't be with his family publicly to be able to acknowledge his contributions to our community, on behalf of council, I just want to take the time to say to Maurice Gom's family that he made our community better for the work that he did, and our thoughts are with you. As well, coming up, there is no Toque Tuesday, which is a highlight in the calendar for Community Care St. Catharines and Thorold. But that doesn't mean Tuesday won't take place. It just means it's not going to be a virtual thing where you can go and get some pancakes, which are delicious, and enjoy a breakfast at Market Square. But you can go online to the community care, and you can start purchasing now. They have masks, they have toques, they have hats, and all the funds raised from raisingtheroof.org will go to help prevent homelessness in our communities. So it's an important fundraiser for St. Catharines Thorold Community Care. So please check that out, and you can go to Community Care STC to figure out all the links to get your masks or toques or whatever you're looking for. Another major fundraising going virtual this year is Start Me Up Niagara's coldest night of the year. A number of us usually walk in that as a team, and it's easy to participate. Sign up at smun.ca, so startmeupniagara.ca. Walk in your neighborhood any day in February and raise funds while you do it. All the funds go to Start Me Up Niagara, and it's important for their housing, employment, food, and mental health services. Another great organization doing some wonderful work in our community. So with that, you're going to hear from Director Brian York about our recovery strategy. And in terms of supporting our business, we have lovestc.ca. It's a great local business directory. We were one of the first communities out of the gate with that directory. So I want to give a shout out to our team and economic development, and you'll be hearing more about the work that they're doing. I just want to end with a note on mental health. I think a lot of folks in our community right now, especially at this time of the year, are struggling with mental health issues. And it's not something that we should be afraid to talk about. It's not something that we should be afraid to engage online with discussions. There's a number of resources out there, from Pass Stones to Distress Center Niagara to the Canadian Mental Health Association. There's CASON. There's so many different organizations. You can reach out to the YW. You can reach out to United Way for resources. If you check out 211.ca, it has all the listings of resources that you would require if you're looking to have a discussion or learn more about mental health. But fundamentally, it's about looking after one another. And as the light at the end of the tunnel is coming, it still is in the distance, and it's causing a lot of anxiety for folks. So what I'm asking is, as counselors, share the resources if you can for what's available in our community for mental health, and also continue to look after one another. Encourage your neighbors, your friends to check in on people, as I think this is proving to be a very challenging time for a lot of folks in our community. These are unsettling times, they're uncertain times, and they're anxious times for a lot of people. So let's just keep looking after one another as we move through this. So sorry about the lengthy one. This is the first time that we've been back to council since December. So I should have started off with Happy New Year. So I hope everyone's had a wonderful Happy New Year. Looking forward to 2021. And I know with this council, we're going to do amazing things because we've got an awesome council. And there's some excited councillors on board because some of their sports teams seem to be doing really well. So if that's a barometer for 2021, then I don't know, I'll have to have a see on this. So adoption of the agendas. I'll look to the clerk for any additional correspondence before we do that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. This evening in your Sugar Sync folder, councillors, you have correspondence from Honourable Jeff Urick, Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, regarding Ontario moves forward with Conservation Authorities Working Group. You also have correspondence from Jane Epp regarding Council Agenda Item 13.2, which is a report request regarding discarded shopping carts. And that's all I have for this evening.
Thank you to the clerk. And are there any amendments to the agenda? No amendments to the agenda. So mover, I'll take Councillor Cisco as the lead because of the helmet in the background, seconded by the equally big fan, Councillor Miller. We're doing some bills today. Much to the chagrin of another councillor whose favorite player is no longer going to be playing football moving forward. We'll talk about that later. And let's see, any conflicts of interest? And we weren't talking about Tom Brady there. Any conflicts of interest? Okay, a motion to adopt the minutes. We have a council adopt the minutes of the meeting of council held on Monday, December 14th, last year, 2020. And that council adopt the minutes of the general committee meeting held on Monday, December 14th, 2020. And that council adopt the minutes of the special meeting of council held on Tuesday, December 22nd, 2020. Councillor Littleton, would you like to move that? And seconded, I'll go with Councillor Phillips. Any edits to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. All right. No items have been removed from the consent to discussion, so we have a motion that council approve the consent agenda, save and accept those items brought forward for discussion forthwith. Who wants to take this one as a motion? Consent agenda, and I'll look to Councillor Sorrento, seconded by Councillor Townsend, and all in favor? Okay, and that is carried. Moving along. There are no public meetings pursuant to the notice bylaw, and we have a special presentation. And John Mascarin, partner for Aird and Berlis LLP, Integrity Commissioner for the City of St. Catharines. Council will hear a special presentation from Mr. John Mascarin, partner, regarding the Code of Conduct reports prepared by Mr. Mascarin and the City's Integrity Commissioner concerning Councillor Porter and Councillor Cisco. I now call upon Mr. Mascarin to present his report. Plural.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Good evening and happy new year to you. This is, I think some of you have gotten to know me over the last number of years. I've been your Integrity Commissioner, I think initially as interim since 2016 and then appointed as your full-time Integrity Commissioner 2017, 2018. I haven't appeared before you, I think, before with respect to Code of Conduct reports, and there's two of them this evening that I wish to speak to briefly. So I'm appearing before you to speak to two reports that were filed against two members of council, both coincidentally in September of 2020. They are in agenda item 7.1. You'll find both reports there. And to her credit, the clerk has very kindly put them in order of how I'm going to present on them. They're actually in reverse order. Complaint 2020-02 is with respect to Councillor Carrie Porter, which I will speak to second. The first report is complaint number 2020-03, which relates to Councillor Matt Cisco. Council has, as required by the Municipal Act 2001, adopted a code of conduct for members of council and for your local boards. I had a hand in assisting your clerk and your legal counsel in putting that together. Council also adopted a complaint protocol, the procedures for what I'm supposed to do to follow in order to properly assess, investigate, and report on code of conduct complaints. As I indicated, there are two reports before you this evening. Although I'm going to speak to both reports, there are no recommendations with respect to complaint number 2020-03. And that is because there is no finding of contravention of the code of conduct or any other ethical rule, policy, or guideline that somehow relates to ethical conduct. There has, however, been a finding of a contravention of the code of conduct in respect to three provisions with respect to complaint 2020-02, and therefore there are recommendations, and those are being put before council tonight to consider and for you to, in my view, impose. I will provide a very short presentation with respect to each of the investigative reports, and as I've indicated, council is not being asked to take any action with respect to the report that relates to Councillor Matt Cisco. With respect to complaint 2020-02, I suggest that council should hear any submissions that Councillor Porter may like to make with respect to the recommendations that are contained in the report. I want to be very clear about this. Councillor Porter is entitled to attend the meeting this evening. You notice that there was no declaration of pecuniary interest. She is entitled to make submissions on the report, to participate in the discussion, and to say what she'd like to say with respect to the recommendations in the report. I also understand and was made aware by both Councillor Porter as well as the clerk that correspondence was provided to all members of council today from the complainant. I have advised Councillor Porter that she is entitled to address that correspondence this evening. Following the submissions of Councillor Porter, I would be pleased to respond to any questions that members of council may have with respect to the recommendations contained in that report, as well as any questions that council may have with respect to procedure or any other related matters to the reports. The one thing that I ask you to please respect is that the investigations are concluded. This is not an opportunity to cross-examine me with respect to the investigative process, how it was conducted, any particular findings, or those matters. It's only an opportunity for council to consider the recommendations that are set in the report. So, our investigation with respect to each complaint was conducted in accordance with our authority as the appointed Integrity Commissioner for the City of St. Catharines. It was done in accordance with Part 5.1 of the Municipal Act, in accordance with the Code of Conduct, and with the process and the procedures that are dictated by the complaint protocol. My two associates in my municipal law group at my firm carried out the investigations as to each report. There were different people dealing with each one. As the head of my firm's accountability mandates, I was consulted during both of the investigations, and I peer reviewed both investigative reports that you have before you this evening. In carrying out the investigations into the complaints, we have acted in a completely neutral and impartial manner, and we've acted in accordance with the requirements of the complaint protocol that council adopted and with the requirements of natural justice and procedural fairness. With respect to complaint 2020-03, that's the first one in the agenda. This investigative report was looked into allegations of contravention against Ward 4 Councillor Matt Cisco. It pertains to a formal complaint that was filed against Councillor Cisco, alleging that he breached Section 10 of the Code of Conduct. Essentially, the complaint alleges that Councillor Cisco became involved in a city bylaw enforcement matter regarding landscaping boulders that were placed on the municipal boulevard adjacent to a residential property. The allegation and the assertion in the complaint was that it was improper for Councillor Cisco to participate in this matter and to take the actions that he did because he had a personal relationship with the city resident, and that his actions therefore constituted an improper use of influence in contravention of Section 10 of the Code of Conduct. Our report sets out in full the code provisions that are at issue, the materials that we reviewed and we considered in reaching our conclusions, a very detailed background as to the complaint, including various actions that were taken by the member that were alleged to have contravened the code. In conclusion and in summary, after a full review of the complete evidentiary record, and we did allow Councillor Cisco to provide a response to the complaint. We also provided his response to the complainant and gave the opportunity to the complainant to provide a reply. Those were all considered. It is our conclusion that Councillor Cisco did not have any personal relationship with the persons he is alleged to have assist. He knew who those people were, but he did not have any untoward or nexus of a personal relationship with those persons. Councillor Cisco also did not exceed his role as a member of council with respect to a matter of bylaw enforcement, which we took very seriously. As you know, as members of council, you are not to interfere with the administration of justice. Bylaw enforcement matters, you can certainly provide comments to persons, you can provide your views on certain things, but you are not to influence the direction and the actions of any bylaw enforcement officers. That did not occur in this case. Councillor Cisco also did not act inappropriately in attending to a matter outside of his own ward. An allegation that was made that he should not have participated in this matter at all because it wasn't in his ward. That is not the law. And there are other integrity commissioner reports that substantiate and support that position. And finally, as a conclusion, Councillor Cisco did not exercise any improper influence as it's written in the code. So for the reasons that are set out in the report, we have concluded that Councillor Cisco did not contravene Section 10 of the Code of Conduct, and the complaint is dismissed. So pursuant to subsection 223.4 sub 5 of the Municipal Act, there is no contravention, and therefore there is actually nothing before council for it to consider. And as I indicated, though, I will take any questions at the end as to any process or procedures or other matters. But as far as I'm concerned, the complaint investigation is concluded and there are no actions for council to take. And we'll now proceed to complaint 2020-03. A formal complaint was filed a few days before the other complaint, I believe it was September the 15th, alleging that Ward 4 Councillor Carrie Porter violated the city's code of conduct for members of councils and local board on account of telephone calls that she made to the complainant, that she made to the complainant's friends and colleagues, and remarks that the councillor made on social media, specifically Facebook and Twitter, and in a local newspaper article. This complaint was investigated by a different associate of my firm, and as I indicated earlier, she consulted with me throughout the investigation, so I was aware of what was happening. The specific allegations are that Councillor Porter contravened 4 specific provisions in Article 4, the general obligations in the Code of Conduct. Those are set out as sections 4.1a, D, E, and F. There's also 2 allegations that she discriminated and harassed the complainant in contravention of sections 9.1 and 9.2. The full text of the various provisions are set out throughout the report where they are discussed. The detailed background to the report is set out in our report, and I do not propose to revisit it. Suffice to say that it is our finding that Councillor Porter was being harassed online by a person known as, quote, Don Bailey, clearly an alias and a fictional person created. We have no doubt, and we have evidence, that Councillor Porter was being harassed. We also empathize with her situation. It is very difficult to be put in the position that she was in, and we have discerned throughout our investigation that there was emotional distress on the part of Councillor Porter throughout this. We have taken that into account. Councillor Porter believed at one point that the alias Don Bailey was the complainant. She confronted, telephoned, left messages, and spoke about the complainant to their friends and associates. Councillor Porter also used social media, Facebook and Twitter, to address the matter, and in our view, while she didn't outright name the complainant, she posted sufficient identifying information that would make the identity of the complainant known to those persons who would know enough to be aware of who the complainant was. Our review of the record demonstrated that Councillor Porter did not have any tangible evidence to establish that the complainant was Don Bailey. And in fact, the evidentiary record appears to show that Councillor Porter at one point had corroborating evidence to indicate that the complainant was in fact not the alias Don Bailey, and that she accepted the complainant's statement in the telephone conversation with the complainant as to the matter. This is all detailed in much more breadth than I've just stated at page 3 of our report. We reviewed the entire evidentiary record, and our findings are set out in some detail commencing at page 5 of the report. It is our ultimate submission to council this evening that our report speaks for itself. As with any investigative report, it distills and it synthesizes the facts, the issues, and it assesses them against the framework of the code and of the other applicable policies. It then makes findings and it draws conclusions. Having said all that, and knowing that council members have likely read the full report in its complete version at item 7.1 of the agenda, we have concluded that the councillor did not contravene four sections of which she was alleged to have breached. Sections 4.1D, E, and F, and part of section 9.2. We have dismissed those allegations. However, we could not find that the councillor's actions did not contravene section 4.1A, section 9.1, and the first part of section 9.2. We have concluded that the councillor did not make every effort to act in good faith and care, and so she therefore contravenes section 4.1A of the code, that her actions constituted, in our view, bullying as is prohibited by section 9.1 and therefore constituted a breach, and that she insulted the complainant by her actions in contravention of the first part of section 9.2. The process, just very briefly to let you know, we initially provided the member with a notice of the complaints and set out that we had determined that there was some merit to the complaints. We did the same with the earlier complaint against Councillor Cisco. We outlined the allegations and we drew attention to the issues that were raised. We asked Councillor Porter to provide us with a response. We were asked by her legal counsel if we could provide an extension to her ability to provide a response to the complaint, and we did so. We provided a modest extension of the time for a legal counsel to reply. We received and consider her lawyer's full representations on behalf of Councillor Porter. These were provided to the complainant for a reply, and we also considered that reply when it was provided to us from the complainant. Finally, in accordance with the complaint protocol, we also provided the councillor with an opportunity to provide comments with respect to the final draft of our report without recommendations, and she did so through her legal counsel. Councillor Cisco was not given the same opportunity because there was no finding of contravention. Your code distinguishes between instances where there's a finding of a contravention and one when there is not. So Councillor Porter had a full opportunity to respond to the complaint and to address any findings that we made. Both the complainant and the councillor, both the complainants and the councillors in both reports fully cooperated with our investigation. Our recommendations with respect to complaint 2020-02, most importantly, our recommendations are set out at the conclusion of the report on page 12. They are actually the only matters, as I indicated, that are before council for consideration this evening. Council is the decision-making body, and it is entrusted with enforcing its code of conduct and with its other policies and procedures dealing with ethics. As noted, my firm investigated the complaints, and we have produced reports in both cases that detail the findings and conclusions. And with respect to the second report, with respect to the first report, 2020-02, makes recommendations. We have done so in accordance with our authority, mandate, and jurisdiction, and with an adherence to procedural fairness to all parties, including the complainants who exercise their rights to make formal complaints. There are two possible penalties that are authorized under the Municipal Act, and they are set out in section 223.4 sub 5. The only two penalties that council can impose and that an integrity commissioner may recommend are a reprimand and a suspension of pay for up to 90 days. We recommend this evening, with respect to Councillor Porter, that council pass a resolution to formally censure her actions. A penalty that I submit to you is statutorily authorized by the Municipal Act. It's a form of reprimand. We are not recommending, and we do not believe it is merited nor warranted, that there be a suspension of remuneration for Councillor Porter. That's the second type of penalty that may be imposed, and we are not recommending that. The law, however, also recognizes that remedial measures or corrective actions may be imposed. These are also authorized in your code of conduct. And it is our view that council should be concerned with respect to the conduct and behavior of a councillor who oversteps the permissible boundaries of what your code says, and should take steps to seek to correct any measures. So it is our recommendation in the report that the councillor make a formal and sincere apology to the complainant before the next meeting of council. This is not recommended as a penalty. It is recommended as a remedial measure only. Mr. Mayor, members of council, this concludes my presentation with respect to the investigative reports. I promised the clerk, and I sent to her this afternoon, an approximate cost of both investigations, and I'd like to provide that to you now in the interest of full disclosure. With respect to complaint 2020-02, the approximate dollar figure for the investigation, the report, and my presentation this evening is approximately $14,500. And with respect to the report 2020-03, the cost is approximately $19,200. I remain available, Mr. Mayor, members of council, to answer any questions that members may have with respect to the recommendations in the report. And I would suggest to you that at the appropriate time, Councillor Porter be offered an opportunity to make submissions as to the recommendations. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mascarin, for that. I do have Councillor Harris with his hand up right now, so we'll start with Councillor Harris.
I can speak. Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what report number was it? The third one, Councillor Cisco's. I was just wondering, so that was $14,000, is that what you said?
I believe, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Harris, the amount, I don't have it final because of course I'm presenting tonight, but I believe it's somewhere around $14,500, somewhere around there.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, the complaint was that he had a personal relationship and it was applying to someone outside his ward. That's correct?
That's correct.
That's correct?
Yes.
Okay, so is there a method, like when complaints like that come forward before we spend $14,000, would it be just common sense that perhaps pretty well every one of us is going to have a personal relationship with someone in St. Catharines? I know Councillor Kushner has more or less taught every single person in St. Catharines. So could you help me out a little bit and define what a personal relationship is?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, personal relationship, I think, would be something, as alleged in this particular complaint, would be something that would be clearly more of a nexus. It would be somewhere where there's a friendship, there is a clear camaraderie, perhaps an association through work where your partners, your co-workers. It would have to be something than just knowing somebody. And if you read the report, you'll see where the allegations came from, that they had lived close to one another. I think their family played hockey together. There has to be something more than that. Otherwise, every council member would
every one of us
possibly run afoul. And I think that's your point, Councillor.
every one of us would be in contravention. The other thing is too, like, what was the issue with helping people in other wards? Like, I guess where I'm struggling here is that you did an investigation that cost the taxpayer $14,000, and realistically, this shouldn't even have made it to you, because if you're helping people in other wards, literally, you could probably do 100 things on me, and people that I have relationships with, you could probably do 100 on me. So I don't know why this even made it to the level of a $14,000 investigation. Like, how do we have an instrument in place that will stop this before it gets to this level of investigation?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Harris. Yes, you do. And in fact, Councillor Harris, how many times have I been before you? Tonight's the first time. Yeah. And I've said, and the clerk can bear me out. She's aware. We've dismissed a number of complaints on a summary basis in the past. We have also reported on a number of complaints that were somewhat perhaps simpler to get through. I acknowledge that the cost is quite high. Here's the difficulty. Sometimes it's very hard when you look at one of these things, and we have an intake protocol. We look at it, we consider it, and we decide, are we going to proceed with it? We don't have to proceed with every matter that comes forward, and we certainly haven't. I think we've dismissed 50% of the complaints that have come in on a summary basis. So there hasn't been nearly that amount spent. I could have dismissed the 2020-03, the Matt Cisco, Councillor Cisco's complaint earlier. However, it had already gathered some steam. We had gotten quite of the way through it, and it really didn't take that much more to finish the report. We had to investigate not only the relationship, but the allegations that he somehow did something contrary to the administration of justice, that he was somehow directing staff. We had to interview a number of people. We had to ask staff, did he do that? It's really difficult. And one thing that we have to guard against in defense is it's very easy for someone to say, you know what, Mascarin, you're not doing your job. You're just dismissing everything outright. You just want to be reappointed again. I'm going to file a complaint with the Ontario Ombudsman. The Ontario Ombudsman then will come and investigate you, and you have to answer it. So, Councillor Harris, I would have to then spend the time to go and defend myself in front of the Ombudsman. And who pays for the cost of that? The municipality does. So I guess I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate where you're going. You're saying you found no contravention, and yet we had to spend $14,000. I appreciate that, and I understand that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the presenter, it's not just that. I'm just wondering if we find that some of these are frivolous, and like, how do we recoup that money? Is there any method of going back to this person and saying, you know what, that was ridiculous and you just cost that taxpayer, we should back charge you? I know maybe that's outrageous, but like, this just cost $14,000 for a councillor that was trying to help someone that they knew wasn't in their ward, and this person was in contravention of bylaws. So how is that even remotely close to being a valid complaint? And is there any remedy or method that the municipality can go back to that person and say, like, you just cost us $14,000?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Harris, that's the cost, I believe, that the province has put upon you to deal with this accountability framework. There really isn't a method that you could now go back and charge. I've been asked by many municipalities, could we charge a higher fee? And how are you going to charge a $14,000 fee to this person? It's very difficult to do that. The Ontario Ombudsman has for many years recommended no fee whatsoever. Ontario Ombudsman has said for closed meeting investigation and other investigations, there should be no cost. It's part of the ethical responsibility and framework that's been put in place to municipalities. And I do appreciate that the cost is very high. Your municipality, quite honestly, Councillor Harris, is been very good over the years that I've been doing it. Minimal costs have been incurred.
Because we're good
this year
councillors.
will be the most expensive.
Okay, so my next question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter. Let's go over to Councillor Porter's situation. So I've seen that Councillor Porter has been bullied. I've seen that people have ganged up on her. I'm just wondering what happens. You said there's no evidence that this person, I can't remember what that person's name is, but he sent us all an email today. What happens if it does turn out that that person is the troll that's online? What happens then if everything was accurate that Councillor Porter said or did?
Yeah. So in my case, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, in this case, that wasn't our finding. If that had been the finding, then the report would have gone the other way. So
No.
your point is, then she would have been justified. Perhaps she would have been justified. It is on the evidence that we found, based on the whole record, that it was clear that it wasn't this person, that Councillor Porter actually knew that at some point, and had really acted untowards to the person who wasn't the troll.
I'm just wondering, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter, what happens if it does come out in the future that that person might be the person?
So I think if I can,
Maybe I'm in contravention. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. That's
I think what Mr. Mascarin is saying is that the facts do show that there's two separate individuals, and so that's what the investigation has shown. So the hypothetical won't materialize, so we won't have to go back down that road. But I think I know where you're going. So
just stirring it up. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go over to Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a submission. Thank you, Mr. Mascarin. I accept your report. And I have a brief statement. And I sincerely believed that, based on the evidence that I had, that the complainant was behind the attacks. And in my haste to stop the harassment and to seek accountability from the individual and those who are providing an ongoing platform for abuse from someone who has a fixation and an unhealthy hatred towards me, I made an error. At the time, I did not believe that I put the complainant's identity at risk by never naming him publicly and by calling the leaders in an organization that he worked with that was also managing the Facebook page, nor did I want to reveal his identity publicly. I simply wanted the harassment of me to end. I support the complainant's assertions that the allegations have upset him greatly, and I'm very sorry for that. I sincerely apologize for the lack of respect and the harm that I caused the complainant. And I want to make it clear that further evidence has revealed after that time, about a month later, that it was somebody else. In addition, as it relates to my conduct that is in question, I am fully aware of my obligations owed as a city councillor to the residents of St. Catharines, and I have taken the appropriate steps to ensure that an incident like this won't occur again while facing abuse. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter, for that. And I'll go to Councillor Cisco for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to place a motion on the floor, and I had sent the information through to the clerk's office today with respect to that motion, simply saying that council receive and implement the recommendations from the Integrity Commissioner report. That council formally requests that Councillor Porter formally apologize to the complainant as outlined in the Integrity Commissioner's report, and the council requests staff prepare a report on the current protections in place to deal with harassment directed at mayors and members of council, and the resources it would require to provide further support to mayor and members of council who are subject to harassment, intimidation, and threats, which is outlined in item 15.3 of today's regular agenda. And that this report be brought to the Equity and Inclusion Committee for feedback before being presented to council.
Okay.
And-
So I wanted to get that on the floor because there is a recommendation from the Integrity Commissioner, and I got Councillor. If you want to, do you want to speak to it, or you want to finish at the end, Councillor?
I'm happy to wait till the end, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Miller, you're up.
Sorry, I just have questions for Mr. Mascarin still, if that's,
Yep.
and then worry about just, and Mr. Thanks for the report through the mayor, and obviously let me know if these questions aren't not what we're supposed to be talking about. I know you outlined that a little bit. I just have, with regards to the identifiability, which I think was a pretty key part of the finding, in terms of what was said was, this person could be identified based on what was said. What was the test, or how do you determine that? Because I honestly, it sort of beggared belief a little bit from me.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure this really goes to the recommendations in the report. It's going back to the investigative process. So it's not that I don't want to answer it. I'll be honest. We looked at the full record, and it appeared to us that certain identifying information was provided to certain people who could very easily have figured out who the complainant was, and that was improper. So if that's what the question that you're asking, Councillor Miller, that's really where we came from. Where is the bright line? There is none, really. You have to deal with it every single time on a case-by-case basis. In this particular case, we believe that enough information had been provided that without too much effort, someone could easily have identified who that person was.
Okay, and just the mayor's going to get upset. Maybe this is a little hypothetical too, but if you determined that it wasn't identifiable, would it have changed your recommendation in this case?
It may have gone to one of the clauses, and I'd have to look at it again. I'm not sure it would have overall changed everything. I still think that there was a breach of those 3 sections that we found, Councillor. I'm not sure. I think it just added to it. That's the best I can do.
Sure. Yeah, and I appreciate that. Just a couple other sort of maybe more general questions about the process, and not the specific process, but in terms of the use of the lawyer, would you say that's common when you investigate these? Do the councillors typically get legal advice?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, typically, I'd say it's becoming more of an occurrence now, Councillor Miller. When I first started doing this work, that didn't used to be the case. It does seem that people are getting legal counsel. I have no issue with that. I'll just state that up front. Does it add to the costs? It certainly does, because usually you don't receive a simple response. You get a 12-page lawyer's letter. So I'll just give you one example, and I'm not being critical of the solicitor that Councillor Porter hired. Very respectful of the whole process, but for instance, made representations on breach of the right to freedom of expression, a constitutional issue. We had to then respond to that, and it's addressed in the report. Something that you probably wouldn't get if you didn't have a lawyer. You probably wouldn't extend to that. So it adds to cost. Most municipalities do not provide any kind of stipend or reimbursement for lawyers or paralegals to be involved. And I think the reason is this: the municipality hires someone like us or Niagara Regions, and many have hired ADR Chambers, very good firm. You hire a neutral, impartial, professional person to do this work. I'm not there to try to castigate a council member. I'm not there to try to proffer the side of a complainant. I'm there to take an impartial, neutral view, unbiased as to the matter. So I would hope that any council member would trust me to do my job, and that I wouldn't necessarily need my hand guided by a lawyer telling me what to do. Again, I make no criticism of Councillor Porter for having hired a lawyer, and deal with lawyers all the time on the other side. Is it common? It's becoming more increasingly so because I think our society is becoming more litigious. But I wouldn't say it's commonplace, Councillor. It does happen maybe in about a fifth of the cases that I'm involved in.
Okay, yeah, no, I appreciate that insight. I think it in my opinion, it sort of speaks to the seriousness with which, Councillor Porter took the complaint in, which I think is good. And maybe budget hawks like Councillor Harris are upset about it, but I think I think it shows taking it seriously. My last question is, with regards to the much debated, sometimes derided, so-called snitch clause that's in our code of conduct, in a situation like this, where these are public comments on Facebook and in the newspapers, what we're talking about, is there an expectation for everyone here on council would have seen those or should have seen those? And are we now liable since we didn't report this issue? Or, could we potentially be in trouble there?
The short answer is no. I don't believe so, Councillor Miller. I think I don't want to venture into that debate. I was on the opposite side of that matter, and I think there's no point in revisiting it.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Garcia, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you I do want to ask Mr. Mascarin for some clarification, but Councillor Cisco has already put a motion on the table that we accept and implement the recommendation, and Councillor Porter has accepted this, so I support that. But I would just like some clarification from Mr. Mascarin on one thing on his recommendation. I believe you said at the end of your presentation on Councillor Porter, when you were talking about the recommendations, that regarding the public apology that she was to make, that this be made before the next meeting of council, whereas the report itself reads that it should be made at the next public meeting of council. So I wanted to clarify that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Garcia, you're absolutely right. I misspoke. I wrote down the wrong thing. You're right. I just looked at the recommendations on page 12. It does say at the next public meeting. You're correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Littleton, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a statement that I've prepared. I'd like to share it with my colleagues. I'm nervous about saying this at this point because there could be some backlash that comes back, but I am going to, sorry, other glasses. I spent a lot of time thinking how I wanted to address this report. I actually disagree with a lot of what is said in the report. I don't know if we're not allowed to talk about, but I'm just going to say that, particularly the footnotes that mention the decision to omit background and or other matters because they were deemed to be irrelevant to the matter at hand. In fact, I think those items matter very much. I also want to point out that I consider Councillor Porter to not only be an excellent councillor, but a personal friend of mine. We have spoken many times about this matter, and I watched firsthand how not only the initial vile behavior affected her, but also her remorse at causing distress to the complainant. Additionally, I wish to add that despite what the report says about it being possible to identify that a complainant, I find that unequivocally false. I had no idea who the complainant was. Councillor Porter never mentioned this person's name to me. And in fact, I didn't know until we had the email that came forward from the complainant today. To the complainant, I'm very sorry that you felt victimized and underwent stress due to the events that happened. I'm sorry you were mistakenly identified as the internet troll. I will support Councillor Cisco's motion that is before us because I think that she's ready to apologize to complainant, and I think that's what should be done. I will, however, like to speak about some underlying issues that are at play here. Because according to the report, the online trolling began in May. For anyone who doesn't know, an online troll is someone who goes online and makes comments, usually nasty, vulgar, rude, completely false or otherwise, after your comments on or postings on social media such as Facebook or Twitter. One lovely aspect of social media is that you can be anonymous, like this individual decided to be using the name Don Bailey. The report and tonight, Mr. Mascarin has said that the alias was harassing the councillor. This is not in dispute. This went on for months. The trolling consisted of posting comments to a page by a community group, some of whose members then liked the comments, just as the report mentions that some people liked Councillor Porter's comments about the troll on her social media, as well as sending her messages and comments on her social medias. I witnessed how this affected Councillor Porter firsthand. It's likely no surprise to anyone that I'm one of the other councillors who was interviewed for the Niagara This Week article discussing how female politicians face much harassment as politicians. This individual, as noted in the report, this is what Councillor Porter says, goes through her social media posts and reposts them with terrible and outrageous comments, including wild allegations and comments about my appearance. He called me a moron. He took photos she had posted of her children and sent messages to her. I'm going to say that again. This anonymous, threatening behavior caused photos of her children to be re-snapshot or whatever you call that, screenshot, and sent to her. Now let me introduce you to the world of being a female politician. If you want to knock yourself out at some of the fun, Google female politicians abuse, and a whopping 27 million responses come back. Here's a very brief summary. A University of Western Ontario report in 2019 entitled The Epidemic of Abuse Against Female Politicians, that's what it's called, epidemic, states while abuse has always targeted female politicians, quote, what's new is the extent of the abuse, which has transformed in large part due to the internet. In recent years, the barrage of attacks on female politicians and journalists has intensified in the online world. Coming even from high-profile people and those in power, the abuse is unchecked and seemingly limitless. In August of last year, the CBC reported Education Minister, this is in Alberta, Adriana Lagrange, got a lovely message that someone hoped she, quote, choke on your breakfast and everyone present there simply watches the life leave your body. A simple Google search will inform you of the horrific vitriol Ottawa MP for Ottawa, Catherine McKenna faces, so terrifying that she has had to hire security. Someone who makes a hobby out of taking shots at me online, someone who really should know better, has used the defense of she should know what she's getting into as a politician. Actually, no. When I and Councillor Porter signed our nomination papers, we didn't see the paragraph that said, you will now be subject to online abuse, trolling, and being afraid that someone might bear you harm. See, while women are often told just ignore it, the fact remains that once in a while someone shows up with zip ties or shoots and stabs someone like Labour Party member Joe Cox because he didn't like her political stand, or someone arrives at City Hall with a self-determined righteousness that they will, quote, arrest a democratically arrested politician for utter nonsense. We saw members of the Heritage Advisory Committee last week publicly discuss some of the harassment and bullying they felt they had received about a parking lot proposal. These are our volunteers who are trying to make our city better. It's simply unacceptable. As someone who runs a Facebook page, it is my responsibility to ensure there is decorum and standards are enforced for everyone who is participating or commenting on my page. I encourage all groups in St. Catharines to really take a look at these forums. Well, some people might say, well, if I have a members only Facebook page, that's private. It is not. One can expect anything published online to be accessed through screenshots, sharing, or other methods. While many people have been calling for Twitter and Facebook to clamp down on the kind of rhetoric spewing from accounts such as Donald Trump's, we have all witnessed why this is important. And I believe that anyone who runs an online group has a duty to ensure the people in the group act with respect, decency, and care at all times. Words matter. As a mother of 3 who attend French first language school, I find I'm constantly telling my kids to, quote, find the right word, because it matters. And we must take responsibility for the words we use. We have a report request coming. Actually, it's already on the floor now. Asking staff to report on the current protections in place to deal with harassment, directed at mayor, members of council, and the resources that we require to further support the mayor and members of council who are subjected to harassment, intimidation, and threats. It's a sad day that we are here, but here we are. It's so easy to be spineless and use an alias to troll politicians online in a public setting with virtually little to no accountability, or to email councillors every couple of days, or wait for it, a couple of times in the same day to harass and complain about X, Y, or Z. None of this helps build a strong community. again, I think Councillor Porter's apology is enough in this instance. Thank you so much.
Just let that sit in. Just let that sit for a bit. Just let that sit. Councillor Townsend, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, thank you, Councillor Littleton, for sharing those comments. I have witnessed and seen right up front the harassment and the bullying, the cyberbullying, the classless comments, the dehumanizing comments made towards Councillor Porter, who has been nothing but an outstanding councillor. Although we might all not agree with the same viewpoints here as councillor, we are still colleagues around the table. My question to Mr. Mascarin is, when obviously the individual identified was not the individual suspected, but what does it, when it comes down to councillors facing harassment online, you know, councillors who put their names forth to represent their community don't put their names forth in hopes to be the piñata around the table. How do we, from our side of the equation, how do we avoid this from, you know, these types of attacks? Obviously, you know, people can file a complaint, but when it comes down to, there should be councillors given the opportunity to stand up for themselves as well.
Mr. Mayor, through you, that's a larger question. It's not really. Look, you can argue all day this point, Councillor, that you know, you signed up, and so you should have a thick skin. I hear that all the time. There's that, but then there's this vitriol, this constant abuse. I understand it. I'm not immune to it. Just giving these reports and doing the job that I do, I'm often portrayed as a villain because I'm not hammering someone with a penalty, or I'm letting someone get off scot-free. So I understand what you're saying. I don't have a ready-made solution for you. Council members should be able to stand up for themselves, but you have to do it within the confines of what your code says. So that's the only comment I can offer you this evening.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Mascarin, I mean, there are times where councillors will stand up for themselves and who will say, write an email back to a constituent who may take it the wrong way. At what point, I know you've touched on it earlier on, but at what point do you realize that this complaint needs to be dismissed? How do you decide on that?
Mr. Mayor, through you, again, there's no bright line on this. We have to assess it when it comes in. We have to look at it, and sometimes we can't determine right away, oh, it should be just dismissed outright. I'll give an example. I think the mayor's actually heard me say this before, because I may have said it at regional council when I was the integrity commissioner there. At one point, I believe I received, I think, 7 complaints from the same individual, and I summarily dismissed each one. And I thought, you know, this person is just going to continue to bring. The 8th complaint had some real veracity to it, and it had some truthfulness. But I had to almost get over my prejudice of, you know, I was almost, and I hate to admit this, but I was almost saying, oh, there it comes again. I looked at, and there was some truthfulness to it. And in fact, he was right. There was something there, but when you have to look through each one. So I can't tell you, this is where I dismiss it, this is where I don't. Some are pretty obvious when they come in. You know, they allege something that actually isn't even something that's a code of conduct violation. Those are the easy ones. But let's look at Councillor Cisco's one tonight. Ultimately, we decided that none of the grounds had any merit. But we couldn't just say that right away. we just couldn't say that right away. We looked at it. We said, well, he went outside of his wards. Why would he do that? He knows these people. We should look at that. So we couldn't just dismiss it outright. If we'd done that, we wouldn't be doing our job. We have to be fair to both sides. And I don't, look, I appreciate and I do feel poorly for Councillor Porter. Please don't read anything in my report as being a castigation of her and the distress that she was feeling. I understand that, but we have to look at it objectively, and that's our job. So we do step back, and I can't tell you that there's this one line you cross that and it's an invalid report, and we'll dismiss it in 5 minutes. We rarely dismiss things in 5 minutes. We really do have to give some consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Mascarin. Master Mascarin, sorry. Were you consulted on the recommendation that's being put forward, the motion that's before us tonight?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, I wasn't, Councillor Williamson.
And I don't know if you had a chance to look at it. Are you comfortable with the way that it is set out?
I'll be honest, I haven't looked at it. I'm accessing you through my iPhone because my camera wouldn't work on my laptop. So I have a very small screen. I wanted to see you. I couldn't read it. My eyesight wasn't that good. And thank you very much, Bonnie, but I'm not sure I can still read it right now.
Okay, Mr. Mascarin, you're there, right?
I am.
So I could be the narrator. The first line is receive the presentation.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt. I've opened it up a little bit. I'll if you just give me a moment, I'll scroll through it. Thank you for that.
Perfect.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Williamson, I've now read it. The first, I think, 2 recitals or 3 recitals essentially relate to the report, and it's the last 2 points, and I don't have an issue with that. I understand why council would like that looked at, and I certainly don't have any issue with that.
Thank you. Would you have a preference in splitting things apart, or is it's okay to leave it together?
I don't have any issue, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mascarin. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Kushner and then Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To you through to Mr. Mascarin. Now, you indicated that the apology should be at the next council meeting, and this calls for the apology at this meeting, which I would prefer because, like all others, I think the quicker we deal with this, the better. Is there any concern with having the public apology at this meeting?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kushner. No, I don't have any issue. The reason we normally put in something like the next council meetings to have some finality, and often the member would like to think about it. So that's why we wrote it in that manner. But should the apology be offered this evening, there's no issue with that.
Okay, thank you. And secondly, the motion requests that the councillor formally apologize to the complainant. And I think you indicated apologize publicly to the complainant. Is there any problem with this?
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Councillor Kushner. Councillor Miller, you're wrapping it up, I think.
Okay, I don't have too much to add to it, to the really brave and wonderful things my ward mate said. I am going to request that we split this motion, because I'm certainly in favor of the staff report, but I'd like to vote separately on implementing the recommendations. I beyond uncomfortable with doing that in this case. I think what's being lost a little bit in all of this is that Councillor Porter is a victim here. And I try not to talk too much about this because it's going to make me emotional too. And that again, as Councillor Littleton said, and those of us who have kids know, we absolutely did not sign up for our kids to have their pictures posted online and have things said about them. Someone reacting to that danger and that potential harm, and Councillor Littleton alluded to Joe Cox being killed for being a female politician with an opinion. I am deeply uncomfortable with policing that. And we have to remember, we are in our current positions, which are city councillors. These are positions that were created by men for men. This whole society that we live in is created by men for men. The integrity commissioner, who I think has done a wonderful job, is a man. 10 of the 12 of us sitting around this council table right now who are going to vote on this are men. I don't think it is our job, and I think it's adding to the problem when we police and the responses that women have to the absolutely horrific things that are said about them online and in person. I could go on and on about this, but no one likes to be against the integrity commissioner's recommendation, but I simply cannot support it. Councillor Porter, as Councillor Littleton said, is an amazing councillor. She's a personal friend and mentor to me, but that has nothing to do with this. In this case, I would support anyone who's taking steps to privately protect themselves and their family by reaching out to acquaintances with a lot of reasoning behind it and asking to identify if they can help identify someone who's potentially putting them in harm's way, and publicly having the bravery to speak out against it, which resulted in a great and really necessary highlight shined on the issue of misogyny and women in politics. So I simply cannot punish someone for trying to protect themselves and reacting in a way that maybe was emotional. And I think that's totally logical and understandable in this case. And so, yeah, for that reason, I'll ask to be voting separately, and I will be voting against implementing the recommendations. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. I think Councillor Sorrento, you wanted to second the motion from Councillor Cisco?
Well, after hearing everything, I'm just thinking about it twice, Mr. Mayor, but I did have a procedural question to ask Council Mascarin.
Okay, go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council Mascarin, Councillor Porter, in her submission of her comments, issued a public apology. Procedurally, does Councillor Porter have to apologize again, or will the original, authentic, heartfelt apology stand? Forget it.
Okay, Mr. Mascarin, I think the question is, Councillor Porter's already issued an apology. Does that suffice for what we've been asked to do today?
I believe that she did issue one earlier, and if council was willing to accept that, I think it was a sincere, honest apology, and I have no issue if council was to accept that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kushner, you got your hand up again. Request to speaking last is Councillor Cisco. Before Councillor Cisco.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if there is no seconder, I'd be willing to second it. Thank you.
Okay, that's good. Then Councillor Cisco, Councillor Kushner second it. Councillor Cisco, and then Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The point is taken, and I would ask that it be changed from formally request the Councillor Porter formally apologize to formally accept Councillor Porter's apology.
Okay.
I'm not going to speak really at all. I think Councillor Littleton said a lot of the things that I think were most important. I will say I understand Councillor Miller and Councillor Miller's point in all of this, and I don't begrudge him that if he votes against the first portion of the motion. There is a statutory requirement, as it was mentioned, and that's really the only reason I'm moving forward with this. I think as Councillor Littleton said, the conduct has been absolutely reprehensible that Councillor Porter has had to deal with. It has frustrated me to no end as her ward mate to see a lot of the anger and the vitriol directed at her and not at me, when really we have been a team on basically every issue in our ward. And I think it's an interesting point to be made that Councillor Porter and I have echoed one another throughout our 2 years together in this term of council. And the volume of anger and hatred that has been directed her way has vastly outstripped the nonsense that I deal with, and has given me a far better understanding of exactly what some of my colleagues have to go through to hold the same position that I hold. But I want to thank Councillor Littleton for her comments. I hope everybody listened very carefully to them, and I would urge everybody to move forward with this recommendation and then get this off of our plates.
Thank you, Councillor Cisco. And wrapping it up, Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to say I would offer to apologize again, but I'm fine with the motion on the floor, accepting my previous apology. I appreciate that some of the councillors want to split this up for various reasons that they've explained. I think in the interest of making things right for the complainant, that we should deal with this together. So I would just don't want to force councillors to be in a position to make a stand one way or another. That's not how I see this. I think we have to deal with the issue at hand. I think there are bigger structural issues that we will be able to deal with at another time. And I think some of the accountability for the things that have happened to me and that happened to other female councillors, that can happen at another time. It's not going to happen tonight, and that's okay, and I accept that. But I think accountability, with what happened to me and how it was done will take place eventually. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Porter was the last to speak. Councillor Harris, you have your hand up. Is it just
It's a procedural thing. Can we divide it into three? So it would be the first section, and then the second part would be that council formally accept Councillor Porter's apology to the complaint, and that would be the second one, and then where Councillor Miller. So it'd be three separate things.
Okay, so to the clerk, there's a request to split the vote, to split the motion into three different ones.
Okay.
Councillor Harris, is that what you're looking at right there?
Yeah.
Okay. Does that work for Councillor Miller as well?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I'll turn it over to the clerk to call a question on the three different clauses. So the first highlighted.
So, yeah, that's correct. Okay, for the first, Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
No.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
No.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Sorry, I didn't think I got to vote on this.
Yes, you do.
Yes. Okay.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
No.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
And that's carried. On the second?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Sorry,
so
just point of order. That was what I wanted to vote on separately also. So this section, I certainly don't need it to be voted on separately, but
this portion here, I'm sorry.
yeah, the highlighted, I meant the first clauses as well. So this clause about formally accepting the apology, I'd remove my request to vote separately because that's not what I meant.
We can, Bonnie, we can take that one and put it in with the last two.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we'll only break it into two then. Okay. Evan, so you can take, yeah. Okay, so councillors are voting on the highlighted section. So, Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend. Councillor Townsend.
No.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor
Procedurally,
Cisco.
yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Littleton,
Sorry, yes, if you didn't hear me.
sorry, now I did. Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Harris,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
and Mayor Senzik.
Yes.
And that's carried. Thank you.
All right, just want to thank Mr. Mascarin for his presentation tonight. Greatly appreciated, even though you are getting a significant
Paid.
reimbursement for the city. But you did a great job as always. And when you talked about the last term of council at Region, you gave me a bit of a bad dream. So I'm going to hold that to account for you, because I had to see you way too many times at last term of council at the Region. But it is good to see you. I hope you have a great year and hope we don't see you again. And to Councillor Porter and Councillor Cisco, I just want to say thank you for your role in being a part of this process. Both of you showed a tremendous amount of professionalism. The challenges that were in front of you, you met them head on, and your cooperation with the Integrity Commissioner and also working with staff is greatly appreciated. And again, Councillor Porter, you've heard a lot of the comments here today, the support from council. And I just got to say that you are a councillor of great integrity. And the fact, again, that you put up your hand today and said, yep, I did something that was wrong and I've accounted for it, shows you strength of your character and your willingness to understand the role that we have here play today is complex at times, but you're also willing to stand up for yourself, which I think we need more of in our community, and we need more people supporting those who are willing to stand up for themselves. So looking forward to the report that'll be coming from the Equity and Inclusion Committee, because I think as councillors, we need to see what we should be doing when we are harassed. It is a minefield out there for those who are on social media, and the anonymity that social media allows really does tug at the mental health of a lot of people. I will say that as an individual who is largely targeted by quite a few folks, the mental strain that you could apply to yourself if you fixate on the negativity and the vitriol that is thrown at you, you can have the thickest skin in the world, but sometimes your mind's not into it and it challenges you full head on. So I can appreciate what Councillor Porter has gone through, and to the broader public, let's just have more respect for people. Let's have more respect for each other, and let's understand that discourse and disagreement are healthy, but any kind of abuse or vitriol is where it actually crosses the line. And so I just wanted to say that as we head into 2021, and the more that we can respect each other, I think the better we'll be as a community and as a society. So with that, we're going to move on to the agenda, and we've got 3.1, which is the Office of the CAO. Shelley Chemnitz, CAO Chemnitz, is going to be providing us an update on the COVID response by the city, which has been outstanding, I will say. And if there's questions that you have, please put up your hand, and after she's finished speaking, we'll go through a bit of a Q&A if you have any. Following that will be the presentation by the Director of Economic Development, Brian York, and Samir Husika, the Downtown Development Officer. So if you have questions on the economic side, leave it for Director York. If it's more operational, CAO Chemnitz will be here to answer it. So over to you, Ms. Chemnitz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And we are happy this evening to have both these reports so that both council and the community can see that while we focus on the various serious things that are facing our community and our corporation, we also focus very strongly on recovery and helping everyone along the way. And these things need to happen in tandem together. So this is our first COVID-19 update report to council for this year. And while I'm sure it's obvious to all of us, I will still state the obvious this evening. The pandemic continues to be an ongoing threat to our community, and although some vaccine has arrived in Niagara, the presence of COVID-19 in our community is more significant than it was when we first dealt with this in March and April. Cases and deaths have increased significantly. Given its new year, it also bears repeating the key objectives our emergency control group has. We continue to be dedicated to the safety of staff and our community, and despite the rising case counts, we do still remain focused on recovery. We also continue to support Niagara Health, public health in the Niagara region, and continue to work to ensure our organization remains in a financially stable condition while ensuring our essential services continue. It's a challenging balancing act and one that we've been doing for almost a year now. It's vitally important that we remain focused on our objectives and have the health and recovery of our community foremost in our decision making. The mayor did give you an update, and you do see and can have access to on the website of the Niagara region how many new cases we have, and we're currently at a total of almost 6,700 cases. Here in St. Catharines, we also currently have the highest number of active confirmed cases per 10,000 population across the region. So it's very serious for us personally here. Several of our indicators remain well above the control red level. And as you know, we are in a lockdown situation at this point in time. We're seeing no steady decline. Vaccination sites, Niagara Health staff are working to support the request received by Niagara Health to provide a facility which can be used temporarily for their phase 1 vaccinations. Vaccinations will focus on Niagara Health, long-term care staff, and Niagara Emergency Medical Services staff. Site visit has been completed at the prospect site of Seymour Hanna, and next steps are being coordinated. For public health perspective, staff are also working alongside Niagara Health to provide, or public health to provide a facility which can be used for the later phases of vaccination rollout, which will include mass immunization of the public. Site visits and planning efforts will be coordinated over the coming weeks. The regional web pages have been updated to include information regarding the progress vaccination has taken within the region. Situation is top of every news cycle, and information changes rapidly, both for positive and negative. And the report gives details of provincial phases for vaccine rollout that's on the agenda this evening. Today, in a joint news release, Niagara Health and Niagara Region report that supply shortages of the Pfizer vaccine are resulting in changes to their vaccination plan. Provincial direction has been received that effective immediately, all first doses of the vaccine are to be used to vaccinate residents, staff, and essential caregivers in our long-term care and high-risk retirement homes. And this is to ensure there is sufficient supply to vaccinate the individuals by February 15th. As you're all aware, we're in a provincial lockdown since December 26th. We entered the province-wide shutdown, which caused many of our city facilities, such as arenas, museums, the Aquatic Center, community centers, and City Hall to close to the public. The closures have an impact on staff and do include some various part-time and full-time staff workforce reductions. Additionally, the province declared a second state of emergency and announced further provincial restrictions and a stay-at-home order on January 12th. Services across the corporation continue to be delivered as long as they align with the provincial orders and can be delivered virtually via telephone or Zoom, etc. And of course, if they're considered essential. The appointment booking application has been, access has been removed from the city's website. Citizens First staff will be managing business over the phone or online, and if alternative arrangements need to be made, they can be accommodated on an individual basis while ensuring health and safety of both staff and residents. Across the corporation, city business that can be accommodated virtually will be handled as such, with exemptions made only in very certain circumstances. Staff that can work from home have been instructed to do so. Services that involve staff entering occupied dwellings, i.e. a resident's home, unless it's deemed essential, will be temporarily suspended. In this round of lockdown, construction of municipal projects are considered essential and are permitted to continue while following protocols to help keep staff and residents safe. Our building inspectors will inspect essential and permitted constructions. St. Catharines Farmers Market will continue for local produce needs, however, only on Saturdays and with access limited to one person per vendor. Our CRCS department continues to provide and invent new virtual programming for our residents to keep them mentally and physically well and engaged. Of course, residents can still access our city services by contacting Citizens First through telephone or on our website. There are some notes in the report that speak to the enforcing of provincial orders. Due to the severity of the resurgence of COVID-19, our main focus is enforcing provincial orders. To ensure the city can continue to focus on pandemic-related enforcement and protect public health, all bylaw enforcement staff are prioritizing their efforts in this regard. And we continue to work and coordinate with Niagara Region and Niagara Regional Police Services to enforce orders and have the discretion of ticketing violators. At the time the report was written, our stats as of January 13th, we've received 224 complaints related to COVID and pandemic-related legislation, and we've issued only a few tickets. We see the volume of these complaints has increased very significantly beginning in the month of December. Due to the high volume of calls, we're asking council and residents, please be patient as we work through our business continuity plans to increase our ability to enforce during the pandemic. Before we head to Ms. Douglas for our financial update, I would like to thank our staff for their continued dedication in keeping our community safe, and for council for your strong support during this time. And please ask everyone to heed the stay-at-home orders that we have at this point. And I will turn it over to Ms. Douglas for an update on the financial situation.
Thank you. Thank you, CEO Chemnitz, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Similar to the lockdown that we had in the spring, the report this evening does include parking enforcement to be limited to safety infractions, including but not limited to fire routes, accessible parking, non-parking areas, and fire hydrants until February the 28th. In addition, payments will be waived for on-street parking and in the municipal lots and our garages for the same period of time. The estimated financial impact of these parking changes, as included in the report, is approximately $119,000. As discussed with the CAO, the city, along with the rest of southwestern Ontario, moved into the provincial grey and lockdown on December 26th. So with the city's 2021 budget being built and approved when the city was operating under the orange restrict provincial COVID-19 response framework, this move obviously does have some financial pressure on the city's 2021 operations. So similar to what you saw in 2020, city staff will provide updates as part of the COVID council updates with regards to the city's financial position. On a positive side, the city did receive some good news with regards to the joint federal and provincial funding announcement under the Safe Restart Agreement municipal operating stream in mid-December. The city received $2.774 million. $2.048 million of those dollars is to support the city's 2020 operational needs as per our application, and there is an additional $726,000, which is a per household allocation to aid in 2021 with the COVID-related operating pressures. The city, for both of these funding requirements, is required to report back to the province how these funds were used and aligned to our applications by the end of March 2021. Thank you, and that concludes the financial update at this time.
Okay, CEO Chemnitz, I'll go to council for questions. Councillor Garcia, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenters, thank you for that update, very helpful. A couple of quick questions, I think, to the CAO. Number one, in terms of construction projects, I wasn't quite clear, considering what happened the last time we had a severe lockdown. Will the work that is ongoing on the Port Lucie piers continue, or does it have to stop?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly all construction projects of the city are considered essential. All construction projects funded by higher levels of government are also considered essential. So where in the first instance there were construction projects that we paused, we are now exempted from that and considered essential services.
Thank you, that's excellent. And the second question through you, Mr. Mayor, is for clarification for the public. And the CAO mentioned some stats and figures from public health. I was quite concerned reading in the St. Catharines Standard, I think a couple of days ago, one of the reports where I believe Dr. Hirji mentioned that when you look at the cumulative number of cases of COVID that we have had in Niagara, that fully 1/3 of them are people in the 20 to 30-year-old category. Did you read that? Because I think if that's true, it's quite significant for people out there in the public to know this, because I think when we're when we're young, we think we're invincible, and it's a lot easier to think, oh, it doesn't matter if we get together, we'll be okay. So if those numbers are correct, I think it's important that the public know that there is that large number of people in that age category that have tested positive.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly that age category is very significant of the positive COVID diagnoses. I would put a plug in here for the regional stat pages. They did recently revamp them. Dr. Hergy has been giving updates to regional council on every second Friday afternoon, and there have been some requests there for modifications to those pages. And for anyone that's been watching them over the last number of months, they are refining and refining. There's quite a large volume of data there as well. If residents go there and click through, you can select St. Catharines or you can select long-term care homes. They're quite active web pages, and there's a lot of information there. And certainly it is very enlightening to read through. And certainly that, as you had referenced, that age group does have a high percentage of our positive cases.
Thank you to CAO and through you, Mr. Mayor. So obviously it's very important that every age category in the public follow the direction from public health. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia, for your very important PSA announcement. I wish more young people would be following that. I got a roll. I'll go to Councillor Cisco and then Councillor Miller, Sorrento, Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually was just hoping to add an amendment to the staff recommendation. If we could ask for a report to the Budget Standing Committee about the vacancy rebate program and the feasibility of holding off on the phase out for 2 more years, given the very clear issues that we've been having. Now might not be the time to completely eliminate that program. So if staff could add that to the motion. I'm not sure who I need to ask if that's friendly, but for that information to be brought to the Budget Standing Committee.
Okay, as we go through the discussion, Evan, if you can add that language to the receiving part of this report, that'd be greatly appreciated. Councillor Miller, you're up next.
Just, I guess, a question. Obviously, there's been some issues with the vaccine rollout, and I know there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen on this. So maybe through you, the Mayor, you could update on the kind of advocacy we can do. I know, I had a message tonight about seniors maybe not receiving the vaccine for a very, very long time. If there's anything or any more advocacy we, the city, can do to ensure more people are vaccinated more quickly, certainly would like to see our vulnerable population vaccinated as quickly as possible. And obviously we know, we all know the issues with the diverted batch of vaccines and things like this.
Okay, and that's a great point. It is something that has been discussed at the region, and the reason why I say that is because public health is the vaccinating body for what we'll be undertaking over the next number of months. But I do think it's important. This is why the lower tier mayors came together, because we were concerned about the vaccination strategy and not seeing it come to life as quickly as we all anticipated it would. But I think we have Director York and direction can be provided to our government relations person who works for the city, Melissa Wensler, and Councillor Miller. I think a direction that you can provide is that the city, through the mayor's office on behalf of council, advocate for senior access to vaccination as much as possible. The same lines that we're using, but use the city of St. Catharines as the vehicle. So Councillor Miller, if you want to articulate just a couple bullet points, we can get it into a letter.
Sure. So as direction that the city of St. Catharines through the mayor continues to advocate for speedier rollout of the vaccine, and particular to our senior and vulnerable populations, and that that Niagara is treated as a priority for vaccinations due to the rising case this year.
Okay. Director York, you'll take that as direction. I'm sure all of council would be in favor of that, because we're seeing more and more delays in the vaccination. And I think the more that we can put up our hand and do this as well as a council, we'll just strengthen that. Director York.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, we'd be happy to provide that support through the mayor's office.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Miller. We're going to try with Councillor Sorrento. You're up.
Mayor, if I fade out, just cut it because I know I've got bad bandwidth. Mr. Mayor, my question is for either Director Kate or CEO Chemnitz. I'm a little concerned about our enforcement bylaw enforcement complement. We were probably receiving many times the calls that we would ordinarily. I'm just wondering if we have enough of a complement currently in bylaw to do all of the enforcements. And also, Mr. Mayor, to one of the directors, I don't know if we're going to have a walk-on tonight in terms of deputizing some of our staff that are able to perform some of the enforcement duties. So I'll leave that with our directors and wait for the response. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sorrento, and through the mayor. First of all, I want to correct that the COVID report Schedule E, I believe, has a bylaw attached to it that identifies certain staff who have been essentially, who, if council approves that bylaw tonight, will be essentially deputized to take on bylaw enforcement matters under the emergency regulations that have been issued by the province. Through to the councillor about your first question in terms of resourcing. The city currently has 4 bylaw enforcement officers. We don't currently have that full complement working at this time. It's a dynamic situation. To that end, we are working with other departments who have put forward some willing participants, as well as, so we're looking at staff from Municipal Works, from Finance, from EFES, and we've also had volunteer support from the Lincoln County Humane Society, who have all offered assistance in helping our bylaw enforcement staff enforce the provincial orders, and the logistical work to get them on board is happening this week, including training and setup. So we are bringing on additional staffing resources to assist with the COVID enforcement, and hope to have that up and running by the end of this week, but it is a temporary measure.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Director. And when it doesn't become temporary, please bring it to our attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Sorrento. Councillor Townsend, you're last up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, my question is, I believe, to Finance, Director of Finance. In regards to the parking downtown right now, the recommendation of the staff report is to not charge till end of February. Do small businesses currently pay right now for parking downtown in the area?
To the councillor through the mayor. So if the businesses are using, are parking in a municipal parking lot or park at a meter, then the business would pay for parking. With the motion being approved, that's in the staff recommendation in the report this evening, then that would remove the charge for on-street parking effective today and moving until February the 28th.
Okay, through the mayor, I would like to put an amendment on the floor to change that till the end of April. I just think that it's important right now for us to support our local small businesses downtown as they struggle through this pandemic. And I'm wondering if that is to the mover, if that would be friendly.
What I'll do is I'll do the same as what we do, Councillor Cisco, is we'll add that language to the motion, and then we'll show the motion on the screen, and we'll have a mover and a seconder for it. And it sounds like Councillor Cisco will move it. You can second it.
Okay, thank you for that. I have another question in regards to youth engagement. Obviously, we were not able to have any type of youth summit this year. My question is there an opportunity perhaps where we can put together a virtual event that focuses on mental health, well-being, lifestyles? Because as you know, a lot of students right now are studying from home, and this might be a good opportunity to have students be engaged in some type of youth summit. Is there an opportunity? Does staff see an opportunity for that this year, and which I would be more than willing to assist with as well?
I'll go to Director York, I think. Start over there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly that's something we can explore. Councillor Townsend, I guess I'm wondering, have you explored this with your committee, the Youth Advisory Committee to date, or is this the first time you're bringing this up?
So this is the first time that it has been brought up. I guess the challenge with that is with the youth committee, it was disbanded because of COVID. It is something that we could reach out to and probably re-engage some of those same students, but because of COVID happening, we weren't going to be able to meet during that time. But it could be a good opportunity to re-engage them with an online virtual event.
Okay. Well, my colleague, Phil Christie and I would be pleased to meet with you to discuss a plan forward.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And looks like we've got a couple more hands up. Councillor Dodge and then Councillor Phillips. Wrap it up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question in regards to masks. Has there been a change to the bylaw on the ability for people that have medical conditions and are unable to wear a mask? If we could get some clarification around that. I understand that some people are being refused entry, even though they say they have a doctor's note or that they do have a legitimate medical reason, but some vendors are saying, sorry, but even if you have that, you cannot come in.
Okay, so we'll go to CAO.
Yep. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll start, and perhaps Chandra is here from our legal services department. There has not been any removing of the exemptions. However, individual, short answer, individual businesses and offices, etc., can have restrictions that are somewhat more stringent than the mask regulations. And so we have had some of this occur in our community and in other communities as well throughout Ontario, where individual businesses have simply said masks are required. And if you're wishing to do business, we can have virtual, like you can order online, you can have the pickup at the door, and they have provided other options for individuals. So certainly individual businesses can make their own determination should they wish to be more stringent.
Okay, and then I just have one other quick question. For our frontline staff and our like our bylaw officers and stuff, I guess I would consider them to be essential. Is there any idea of when they may get a vaccination?
At this point, the protocol as far as essential is in the healthcare sector. It is not extending to municipal staff. So it is starting with those more vulnerable populations and moving on the way out. So they are not included in this initial phase one, we'll call it.
Okay, I'm just because I think that if we're asking bylaw to enforce people that are possibly breaking COVID rulings, that maybe they would be more of I know that they're not health and like that type of frontline, but they are frontline, and we're asking them to do a duty to keep others safe. So I don't know if there's something that we can do to maybe put a little bit of protection in there for them.
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, we are certainly indicating we are no longer going into residents unless it's absolutely necessary. They are provided PPE, and we are always understanding if they feel a situation is not safe that they can remove themselves from the situation, and we find another way to provide that service. So yeah, I do agree that we do need to keep our staff safe, and we are working through that as best we can.
Okay, thank you for the updates.
Just picking up on that, CAO cabinets, maybe add that to the discussion for your CAO working group and report back to council just with a memo indicating where in the timeline of vaccinations that city staff would be situated. Because I've seen the graphs that go out to about September. It'd be nice to know if we're in April as a staffing complement where we are. So if we can get that information back. Thanks for that question, Councillor Dodge.
We can do that.
Oops, you're wrapping it up.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director Smith, now that we've had the lockdown imposed and the stay-at-home order, one reason that we can leave our houses, obviously, to get some exercise. I was wondering that in a snow event, if we'll be making an effort to keep our trails plowed on a more regular basis, such as the Walker's Creek trails or the Welland Canal Parkway trails, if we'll be making more of an effort to keep those clean so that our residents will be able to have the exercise that they so badly need in the situation that we're in.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, although that was not included in the budget for this year's review, we can take a look at that. And if there's significant budget implications, we'll report back to council. If we can accomplish it within our complement and resources, we will do so.
Okay, thank you. So I guess, Mr. Mayor, perhaps we could, in our senior team, when they're discussing the elements of COVID, we could include that in that discussion too then.
No, great question. A lot of people using the trails. We've been very fortunate to have good weather, and I've never seen the trails more used in the last, I'm gonna say 2 or 3 weeks than I have ever on some of the trails that I'm on. So great question.
Hence the need to keep them plowed.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Okay, seeing no other further questions, I'm going to look to the council coordinator and see if he can bring up on the screen what the motion is that we'll be moving on. Moved by Councillor Cisco, seconded by Councillor Townsend. Okay, so we got 3 elements here. One is to receive the report. One is also an extension of the no parking, which I think does make sense. It looks like we're in this for a lot longer, and we could revisit it at the end of April or closer to the end of April. And then you have the 2-year extension for the feasibility of the vacancy rebate. Councillor Cisco, thank you for that. That'll be a good discussion to have because I think we're going to be seeing a lot of vacancies in the next little while. And so that's what's on the screen right now. Councillor Garcia has got his finger up.
Mr. Mayor, through you, when I look at the motion, I understand the thrust of what Councillor Townsend wants to do and support it. I just wanted to ask staff, I believe in the report they had stated that the way they were recommending it to the end of February was going to be a $120,000 hit to our revenues. So I assume that if this is approved, that they will be reporting what the total loss of revenue would be going to the end of April, because essentially we're extending it by 2 months. So I assume that it will at least double. Is that, maybe staff can comment on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the estimation in the report was $119,000 per month. So if we extend it to the end of April, then there would be 4 times that amount, which would be approximately $480,000.
Thank you. That's very significant. So I guess we need to monitor that. If there is a time when we feel we don't need it, we can always have a motion to end it early if we have to.
Okay, and thank you for that. And just picking up on Councillor Townsend's, so where in here in the motion does it speak to small businesses downtown that have to pay for permit parking? That hasn't been captured here to the council coordinator. So it's that first one is related to parking enforcement. The second one is waiving payments for on-street parking and parking municipal. So is that the one that you wanted to be changed, Councillor Townsend? Or is yours?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that is the one I wanted to change. And I also, if I can just quickly make a comment too, in regards to the 119,000, that's during a time when, you know, downtown has the ice dogs, downtown has, you know, is a fully, it's a busier downtown where restaurants are having indoor dining. Is that the correct assumption on this?
We'll go to Director Douglas.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the assumption in the report was based on the revised figures that we have based on the parking collections that we saw in the months of October, November, and December. So it would be based on the reduced COVID situation type of parking, not the regular parking revenues and violations that we would experience in a regular non-COVID time.
Okay, thank you. Through the mayor, I mean, then that can essentially, we could possibly suggest that it was budgeted higher than what, no, it's pretty, okay, pretty accurate. Okay, thank you.
Well, anyone who's been downtown in the last two weeks has seen that there's no one downtown. So, you know, it's based on what are we doing to be able to support businesses who are still open downtown, and we do have businesses that are open, and help to support them and the customers that are coming in to quickly do some curbside pickup. So understand the financial issue, and as Councillor Garcia has pointed out, but also I've been now speaking to a number of different business organizations, and they keep saying, what are you doing for business? What are you doing for business? And I think you're going to hear more in the next remarks from Director York. So I just want to focus on this one. So if there's no other further questions on this one, I'll call the question on this motion.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. And that's moved by Councillor Cisco, seconded by Councillor Townsend. Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
I got to unmute Councillor Miller.
I'll just move on. Councillor Porter.
Yes.
I think you're too fast, Councillor Miller, with your button. No.
Councillor Miller.
Yeah, it's not working. Your thing's not working now. No. Give us the thumbs up to say yes, and then come back onto the Zoom, and you might have to check in and come back on. Okay, go up next.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris. Councillor Harris. Okay. Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento. Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Senzik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
I think there was R2D2 was on here too, saying. Okay. Director York, I don't know if you want to introduce this or if the CAO wants to introduce the next one. I'm looking for CAO Kemnan. So do you want to go right to Director York?
I can start briefly. I had a little bit of it in mind, but basically we're happy to bring this report forward to let council and the public know the hard work that our EDTS staff have been doing, and also from my part to emphasize that we continue to be focused in recovery, regardless of how the case count is going. We always have our mind towards recovery because our citizens and our businesses need us to be there. So I will pass it on to our presenters.
All right, well said.
Thank you, Shelley. So good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to provide a brief presentation that will help illustrate and support the report recommendations before you tonight. Before we begin, I'd like to start by acknowledging not only the work of our Economic Development and Tourism Services staff, but all city staff. Just 7 months ago, this council approved one of Ontario's first municipal frameworks for recovery that included an economic development pandemic recovery strategy. And we remain grateful for your support of staff's efforts in balancing the needs of the community, coupled with the necessity to provide more services in areas we haven't traditionally focused. Through continued restrictions and mandated closures to help stop the spread of transmission, it is crystal clear that reacting and adapting has become the new norm here. There have been many insights gained since the onset of the pandemic, but the one we're reminded of on a daily basis is that our business community, and in particular, our restaurant and hospitality sector, is filled with resilient innovators who are committed and invested in St. Catharines. I will now turn it over to my colleague, Samir Husika, Downtown Development Officer, who will take you through a presentation highlighting some of the key recovery efforts we've initiated or partnered on in an effort to mitigate the impacts of COVID-19 on this important sector of our economy. Samir?
Thank you for the introduction, Brian. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I'll be taking you through the remainder of the presentation for this evening. So with the resulting restrictions and closures that followed Ontario's declaration of a state of emergency, economic development staff moved quickly to adapt their services for businesses in our community. This included the release in May of 2020 of the council-approved pandemic recovery strategy, which includes 17 key outcomes, 25 initiatives, and 79 action items that cover a range of economic sectors with 5 outcomes and 26 action items that explicitly reference the food and hospitality industry and its recovery. This strategy together with the city's framework for recovery, as well as the city's strategic plan, have been the guiding documents for our efforts following the principles of resiliency, recovery, and momentum. So with this in mind, the slide that you see before you is a timeline of economic development support efforts for businesses beginning in March of 2020, when the Ontario government made its first declaration of a state of emergency, followed by the subsequent restrictions implemented in Ontario to prevent the spread of COVID-19. This clearly shows from March onwards the extensive efforts undertaken by city staff to support businesses. Given the size and length of the timeline, I'd like to use this presentation as an opportunity to highlight just a few of the support efforts, followed by a brief outline of what we as a department have planned for 2021. So one of the first actions taken by EDTS staff was the launch in April of 2020 of pickupstc.ca, which has now evolved into the lovestc.ca website. And this was as a means to provide support for restaurants and food-related businesses by offering a one-stop shop for customers looking for options for pickup and delivery services, as well as to support local food and restaurant businesses. In addition to this, with support from EFES staff, free 15-minute curbside pickup parking was provided in several key locations across the city, including downtown and Port Dalhousie as a further support for this initiative. Following this, moving into the spring and summer months, Council's decision to waive patio fees and the subsequent direction for staff to work together with the St. Catharines Downtown Association to initiate weekly road closures provided restaurants the ability to utilize outdoor space to compensate for reduced capacity under provincial and public health regulations, and allowed patrons a safe way to dine and to support businesses in keeping with public health directions. Both were successfully led and implemented by planning and building services staff and municipal works staff, respectively, including an expedited patio approvals process that saw the daily approval of patio permits. Additionally, staff worked together with local partners to initiate activations to support the downtown road closures to allow for safe and distanced ways to support local businesses, including drive-in theaters, art and musical activations, as well as partnering with groups such as the Niagara Wine Festival to provide programming and pandemic-safe activations at the vacant lot at 201 St. Paul Street to replace previously canceled annual wine festival events. This was also followed by the activation of Holiday Square in November in partnership with CRCS staff and the Downtown Association and Innovate Niagara to implement a holiday market as a safe alternative to the annual Santa Claus Parade. It should be noted that these events and activations were run following public health guidelines, and in the case of the holiday market specifically, following red level control measures to ensure safety. As a support for these initiatives and activations, staff also implemented a branded marketing effort to support local and downtown businesses through the Our City, Our Summer campaign, followed by a holiday shopping season campaign, encouraging residents to support local. This included initiatives such as engaging local media to do features on local food and restaurant businesses, as well as the Leading Change video campaign, which encouraged support for local businesses. In addition to initiatives to drive traffic to local businesses, staff also relaunched the successful Digital Main Street Service Squad program, offering supports to local businesses adapting to the current challenges of COVID-19 through one-on-one digital consultations, support for more than 50 successful digital transformation grant applications, facilitating the building of several e-commerce capable websites for small businesses through the Shop Here program, as well as a current project being led by our DMS team in partnership with the Downtown Association to launch a digital downtown e-commerce vendor market to allow small businesses in the downtown to sell online. So this is just a summary of some of the main initiatives that have been led or supported by city staff to support small businesses and specifically provide much needed support for a food and restaurant sector that is facing some serious challenges resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. Looking to 2021, our economic development team is continuing to evolve and adapt its programming to the changing needs of businesses. This includes continuing efforts to lobby upper levels of government for sector-specific supports for the restaurant and hospitality sectors, and includes the recently announced Tourism Adaptation and Recovery Fund grant program, as well as the Ontario Small Business Support Grant. In addition to this, we've transitioned the Pickup STC program to the rebranded Love STC campaign. Love STC was launched by our team just prior to the holidays and was created as a way to connect the community and the consumer to local businesses that are run by our families, our friends, and our neighbors, and demonstrates why it's more important than ever to remain loyal to local by supporting local restaurants, retailers, and other businesses. It's also a platform to tell our story by focusing on highlighting individuals such as the chef, the local artist, the brewmaster, as well as those that have invested and continue to reinvest in our community. This campaign kicked off with significant investment around the holidays to drive consumer interest through a robust campaign using digital, radio, billboard, and transit promotion. And going into 2021, Love STC will continue to build on this support local narrative, as we also continue to work with partners such as the St. Catharines Downtown Association, as well as arts and culture organizations in the community to coordinate pandemic-safe activations in the city as a way to encourage safe ways to support local businesses, and of course, in accordance with provincial and public health directives. Finally, looking at some more sector-specific solutions, we're also working together with partners such as the City of Toronto's Economic Development Department and the Ontario Restaurant, Hotel and Motel Association on specific programming to support the food and hospitality sector that includes a program we have proposed to FedDev Ontario to initiate a COVID-safe dining accreditation program to build consumer confidence in dining at and supporting restaurants, as well as a more long-term program that will look at addressing the need to create a more sustainable and resilient food and hospitality sector through business support and training that will include working together with post-secondary partners such as the Niagara College Canada Food and Wine Institute. So lastly, in addition to our colleagues in several city departments that have provided leadership and support for these initiatives, we'd also like to acknowledge the support of our community partners that have also played a crucial role, including the Niagara Economic Rapid Response Team, Downtown Association, Performing Arts Center, Niagara Artist Center, Innovate Niagara, Tourism Industry Association of Ontario, Tourism Partnership of Niagara, and several other partners. So to conclude, the recommendations of this report are asking that as a further support for food and restaurant businesses, council direct staff to explore the continuation of temporary road closures in the downtown as a measure to support local restaurants and businesses, and also to extend the temporary outdoor patio program until January of 2022 and waive all associated fees for sidewalk and pop-up patios. Thank you, and I'd be happy to take any questions you might have on this report and presentation.
All right, I had my mute button on. I wasn't trying to not ignore the fact that you did a great job, Samir. I gotta say that I've been with Samir to a lot of the businesses that we visited over the summertime and the fall. And Samir is known by a lot of people in the business community, in the small business areas of downtown, Port Dalhousie, 4th Avenue, Meriton. He is a great asset, and this is one of the first opportunities that we've had to see Samir here present. So I just want to say you did a great job. Over to Councillor Garcia.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Samir and Brian. And I have been aware of Samir's great work before, and I agree with you. I think the focus on the food and accommodation sector is definitely appropriate. These businesses have suffered so much, and I think we all try to support our local businesses, but it's so hard in the restaurant business, particularly. So I just wanted to ask Samir or Brian to comment on the question of delivery fees. I know that City of Toronto and other cities have complained about the fact that these delivery fees take such a big bite out of what the restaurant reduced margins are. And I believe the province had changed some regulations to temporarily limit those, but if perhaps they could clarify that for us.
All right, turn it over to one of you.
Okay, yeah, sure, I'll start. Through you to the council, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Yes, when Toronto, the city of Toronto, entered, well, the first community to enter the lockdown, restrictions on those fees were placed. So they limited the amount that an Uber Eats or somebody of that nature could charge. There is an advocacy effort to push to have that extended across other major city centers, including Hamilton. I believe there's some correspondence on your council agenda this evening. That's certainly something that our GR advisor and myself have been advocating for, and we'll continue the letter campaign to have that service reduction, the cost of delivery in our community as well.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, is that something that our council has authority over, Brian? Like, could we make a motion that this be reduced? Or?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, it's not a municipal driven effort, unfortunately.
So, okay, so what the province was talking about has not been implemented across the province then?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct, as far as I'm aware.
Okay. My second question is a general question. This is a great program. You have put together a really good program here. The key to it now will be to communicate it. So I just wonder if you could please comment on what efforts are we going to have to make sure that all businesses out there are aware of this. Like the program is only as good as people knowing about it and being able to use it, obviously.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, can you clarify, Councillor? Do you mean the Love SDC program? Which program?
Just the whole program that you have laid out. It includes a number of initiatives, and I think it's important that that businesses in general be aware of all of them. But of course, there are some specific ones. Yes, I would think that it would probably be worthwhile to have this presentation shared with some of the businesses, for example.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly everything captured in this report is part of our pandemic recovery strategy, and we intend to continue to share that with business associations, members of the community. We have an active newsletter campaign that hits as many businesses have signed up, a couple thousand across the community, and through the council updates that we provide you, we look to you and your colleagues around the table to share this information with constituents. In moving forward, the Love STC campaign is certainly something that we're heavily invested in, and a campaign that we haven't put as much effort into one single campaign as we have this, because it's so important to support local these days. And moving forward, we want to see that one successful. So I'm not sure if Samir spent enough time on that slide, but what it shows, and we can certainly reflect on it, we're going billboard, we're going radio strong, we're going digital strong. It's an effort that we're fully invested in, and I think every member of the community should or will know what Love STC is, certainly in a month's time.
Excellent, and hopefully we will get some coverage of this in the local newspaper as well, and perhaps we'll be able to talk it up on CKTV and other radio stations.
Thank you.
Councillor Garcia, Councillor Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just need some clarification on the recommendation. You're asking for the downtown to get waived all the fees and whatnot for the pop-up patios and that type of stuff. Does that include outside of the downtown, or is it just specifically for downtown?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it extends across the city. So what you see in the recommendation is that we're asking council to allow us to re-explore the closure of the street closures downtown, the road closures. But in terms of the temporary patio program, we'd like to extend that across the city again.
Okay, because when I read the beginning of the motion, it's just talking to me. It sounds like just downtown. So if we could maybe clarify that it would be extended throughout the city, that would be nice to have in the motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor.
Oh, sorry. I just have one other quick question.
Yep.
To promote our businesses, whether it be a restaurant, any small businesses, what can they do to get on the list or in the involved? Like, how can they get their name and their information out there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's as simple as visiting lovestc.ca and signing up on our platform.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Councillor Dodge, Councillor Phillips, and then Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I might have missed this, but as far as the free parking is concerned, does that include the business area of Port Dalhousie?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that's a question better answered by the Director of FMS.
Okay. I would direct.
Yep. Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the waiving of the parking fees, it's in all municipal lots and on-street parking across the city, so it would include Port Dalhousie as well.
Thank you. We wouldn't want to forget Port Dalhousie, would we? Thank you.
All right. Going to Councillor Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comments are just really congratulatory to the director and his team, Samir and Sabrina. I've just, through this whole pandemic, what we've seen successful businesses do is that pivot, right? Some businesses have just been able to pivot to online, pivot to a different delivery model, whatever that might look like. And I just want to say that I think, in my own humble opinion, it's interesting that the department has had to pivot as well. And I just want to say all of these initiatives, the pick up say STC, that was a great name, right? We're going to pick ourselves up. We're going to pick ourselves up emotionally. We're going to pick up food. We're going to do like all of these ideas. And now Love STC. And I just shared it on Twitter and Instagram through my Facebook. This is all wonderful initiatives that we can do as well to help businesses. So I just wanted to say thank you for all the work that you're doing. I've been on the, with the Digital Main Street grant, pushing that for business to do that pivot, because making a website is not always the cheapest endeavor. And sometimes you don't know how to do it. So being able to do that and having that support for our businesses, we've done the Queenston Live, whatever we call that on Instagram. That was a lot of fun. And just, it's really amazing what you're doing, and so it's very appreciated, and I think some of our businesses have really benefited from the work. So thank you. I'm happy to continue to share whatever I can to help our businesses in Meriton across the city as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton, and Councillor Cisco, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a few questions with respect to the report. One of the things I was curious, I know that a number of the businesses, I mean, I've been on the Love STC site, it's pretty comprehensive. Businesses have been able to sort of fit their inventories into this. How time intensive is the process for the businesses that are trying to work through the city's initiatives? And I ask only because my general comments would be, I'm appreciative of all the things that have been identified in the report, but I think given the strain that a lot of our small and medium-sized business operators in the city are under right now, asking for them to do even more to be able to fit into city programs might be a bit much. So what sort of additional workload are we looking for from those businesses?
There I am talking again. Thank you. Sorry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's as simple as entering in your business information, name, business address, contact information on Love STC to be able to take advantage of the marketing machine that we put together on this one. In terms of what you saw in the report on the temporary patios, again, it was an application process that staff quickly reviewed and provided approvals in a safe and effective manner that followed building code compliance and city compliance and that sort of thing.
Okay, so when it comes to existing online inventories that businesses have, are those featured directly on the website, or is the website a pass-through portal to take residents to those businesses and their, say, Shopify storefronts or Etsy storefronts, whatever the case may be?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at this point it's pass-through, and I believe Samir alluded to this, that working with the Downtown Association to create a shop local portal that would allow area businesses to upload inventory content, advertise, market, and sell online. That's the next phase.
Okay, so then my comment would be to that next phase, as I had mentioned, just if we can do everything we can to try and avoid asking businesses to duplicate work, to have to go and re-upload inventories. I know how much work, and I mean, if you walk down St. Paul Street, I'm thinking specifically of Mate Cafe and the work that Chris at Mate has done to pivot, and I literally am starting to hate that word because I know how much we're expecting of these business owners. But has pivoted successfully and, you know, has created a very different enterprise from what he initially set out with. To pile on work, I'm hopeful that we can find a way to allow them to be able to just plug in the work that they are doing and have done going forward with whatever additional phases we may have. The other question I wanted to ask, and this is related to, in the report, it talks about a couple of additional certification and an additional accreditation specifically for restaurants. I think that was what it was directed at, as a means of increasing confidence. And I was wondering, we do a lot. I mean, restaurants are already inspected on a regular basis. The reports are posted publicly. You can go on the Niagara Regional website and see those reports. Is there necessarily a need for additional accreditation, or is there a different marketing strategy that we can take in terms of increasing consumer confidence in getting back out to restaurants when the time is appropriate? And again, this comes down to my concern with respect to putting too much on businesses to now create new hoops to jump through. I want to make sure that we're minimizing the amount that we're asking of these businesses because they are already, I mean, in many cases, you know, running with virtually no revenue and trying to maintain operations. How do we see those processes moving forward, and are we going to be asking additional work that's really a duplication of what's already done?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll start, and then perhaps Samir can comment thereafter. The purpose of the accreditation program, and I agree with you that public health is paramount, and they already have a machine that comes in and inspects and verifies. This is about providing confirmation or affirmation that the general public has a heightened safety awareness around COVID-19. So the accreditation would help mitigate some of those concerns and rebuilds trust with the consumer. So when this pandemic is over, I don't know if there will be a mass rush back indoors, and it's about building the confidence that those businesses are safe to visit. There's a strategy in place. And to your point, it may just be reiterating the public health process of approvals in that marketing effort. Samir, anything to add on that? And by the way, that isn't funded yet. We've made application with ORMA and the City of Toronto and Niagara College as a supporter. We hope that if funded, when funded, we'll be able to run that pilot here in St. Catharines first. Samir?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think just to echo what Brian has said, the idea behind this accreditation program is more so to highlight the fact that these particularly food and restaurant businesses have to reach a very high threshold in terms of food safety, and especially during a pandemic, the threshold is quite high for dining. And so the purpose of this program is not necessarily to give restaurant owners more work, I guess, but more so to highlight the fact that they actually put so much effort into reaching such a high standard to ensure the safety of patrons at restaurants. So there's a component to this program that is also a marketing component that would promote the fact that these restaurants are going over and above standards to ensure the public's safety, and as Brian mentioned, really emphasizing the fact that they've put this much effort into it.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and I hope that most of the work is done through that marketing campaign. I think restaurants specifically have been unfairly stigmatized over the last 8 months, and I know this council has been very consistent in its commitment to the dining and hospitality industry. We've passed a number of motions that I think have been supportive, and I appreciate the report and all the work that ECDEV is doing to try and augment the industry, because it is a difficult one. It does represent 5% of the national GDP, and I don't think people realize just how many Canadians are employed directly or indirectly as a result of the dining and hospitality industry. But it's a staggering number, and we need to maintain as much of that industry as possible. The last point I'm going to make, and the last thing I would ask, and I don't know if this necessarily completely falls under this, but because of all of the emphasis being placed on the dining and hospitality industry with this report, I would hope that ECDEV is also pushing the St. Catharines dining industry, the employers and their employees to access whatever mental health supports exist. This industry has been incredibly hard hit, and I think we need to be doing everything we can to encourage those businesses and connect them with the supports that do exist within our local community. And I would also say, and I will throw this plug out, and I would hope that our ECDEV team is also encouraging the local dining establishments and the dining and hospitality industry to join the SaveHospitality.ca campaign, the advocacy work that's been going on there. I know if I'm seeing a group on TV making the points about the dining and hospitality industry, it's them. Save Hospitality has been on CBC, on the CTV News, across the spectrum, and I think it's incumbent on our local businesses to join that fight, because that voice needs to be augmented in the days, weeks, and months ahead. I think there's still a very, very rocky road in front of the dining and hospitality industry, and so I appreciate all the work that our staff are doing. And I would look forward to making the motion, and I will have one additional point for the motion, or two additional points for the motion as well, with respect to patios and business licenses at that time.
Thank you, Councillor Cisco. Councillor Miller, you're up.
Just, can you hear me yet?
Yeah, I got you.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Just a question, and thanks for the presentation, Samir and Brian, and obviously all the work you're doing. I think it's incredible and really positive. I guess my question is regards to the staff time and resources we're using on this. Should we be thinking moving forward, because I think these are resources maybe we should have all the time, right? I don't think they should necessarily go away. Are we thinking about how we can continue to offer these sort of one-stop shop to support business, you know, in the hopefully coming world post-pandemic?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we've certainly been grateful of the support of the province and the federal government. We've never seen cooperative marketing dollars like we have during the pandemic. Sustainability will be key, as you say. The Digital Main Street program has been a game changer for a lot of businesses in St. Catharines, and Samir said 50 plus. So, you know, we'd like to see 500 businesses take advantage of something like that. We continue to advocate to both levels of government for support of that program and maintenance. In fact, we have a couple of letters of support in right now, and the feedback is positive that both levels think that this may or should be renewed. The advocacy continues. We do have a couple of vacancies in our department. I'm going to fill those immediately to put more boots on the ground. But at this point, we're holding our own. We're punching above our weight, and we'll continue to support this business community.
Thank you, and thanks again. And obviously, I guess, you know, don't hesitate to come to this council for support, because I think this is something we're all behind and want to see continued moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller, for those comments. Greatly appreciated. Seeing no other presenters, we got a motion that'll be put on the floor, and I believe it's being moved by Councillor Cisco, seconded by Councillor Phillips. So to make sure all the information has been captured, Councillor Cisco, you're okay with the amendment? You're up to speak.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to mention the two amendments that I had asked to be included. That staff streamline the patio approval process so that going forward, those patios that have been approved in previous years won't have to go through the entire approval process again. I know staff do a very good job of trying to streamlining these processes, but I wanted to make sure it was included in the motion. I'd like to see those previously approved patios just have to deal with the insurance issues and ensure they have the proper insurance.
I turn my cell data. Oh, sorry.
Ensure that they have the appropriate insurance and they can move forward. The second part is asking for staff to report back on the possibility of business license fee waivers for 2021. and what the financial and other implications of the license fee waivers would be. And I would ask that that report come back to the Budget Standing Committee. Actually, I should have included that at the time, but ask that that come to the BSC before coming forward to council. And this is something that's been raised. We've talked a lot over the last year about the limited levers that City Council and the city level of government actually has to pull when it comes to providing relief for businesses. But this is one area where we may be able to provide some relief. And so if staff could report that to the BSC, we can make a decision with the information.
Okay, well done. And I don't see anything else on the agenda there for this recommendation. So I will call the question to the city clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris. Councillor Harris has left. Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Senzik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right. Just before we move on to the next subject, I would like to thank Director York and his team for all the work that they've put into this entire economic recovery strategy. I can speak firsthand into working with Director York, connecting with businesses, and also seeing the speed at which they've approached the situation. I think both the Pickup STC and the Love STC are great examples of the kind of ingenuity and innovation that we have here at City Hall with people like Brian and his team. They are doing what they can to support business. And anytime I'm asked about what is the city doing to support businesses, it is very encouraging to be able to point to these kind of touchable ways in which they're working with businesses, but also as a council for what you've done tonight as councillors to help save important dollars. Because while the parking fee may be a $75 parking fee for a small business operator who's operating on their own, that adds up throughout the year. And these are the little markers that we can show are making somewhat of a difference for the small business owner. So I think as councillors, take pride in the decisions that you're making. And to the senior team, CAO Chemnitz and Deputy CAO Oakes, along with your senior team, you know who you are. The entire senior team is on this call. Every one of your departments is standing up and being counted when it comes to trying to come up with ways to support our community. So you should all be very proud of all the work that you're doing. It's not easy, and I know your staff is stressed, but the reality is that when we look and see the work that you're doing, you're putting all your heart into it, and that's what matters most, because our community is better for all of your efforts. So with that, we're going to move to the next. We're getting through this hopefully pretty quick in the next little while. We've got Director Christie, you're up, and we'll have you speak to that briefly and then go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, good evening, everybody. First things first, I'd like to make a recommendation or a change to a correction to the second recommendation in the report before you. The second recommendation should read as follows: that council approve a one-time capital expenditure to temporarily relocate Private Watson with an upset limit of $70,000 plus HSD, funded from the infrastructure levy reserve. So the key, the significant change in the correction is that it's a temporary relocation of the monument. This report is informing council of the recommendations from the conservator hired by the city to assess the Private Watson monument. As part of the regular assessments done on city-owned cultural assets, Maltby and Associates provided staff with condition reports both in 2019 and 2020, citing that the Private Watson monument has been deteriorating over the years. Following the direction provided to staff by council from at its meeting on July 27, 2020, our team retained Maltby and Associates to provide a strategy to relocate the monument and to determine the monument's condition. Our team felt that at this time, having this information prior to seeking feedback from stakeholders is vital to any long-term decision regarding the monument's eventual long-term future. What council has this evening is a recommendation to temporarily relocate the monument for at least 1 year to an indoor facility so that it can fully dry out. Following that, further testing can take place to see if the coating can be removed, repaired, or replaced. Staff will report back to council once the assessment of the monument is complete and before we consult with the stakeholder groups. Our team is aware that the feedback we receive from the stakeholder groups will be varied, but we felt it was necessary to inform the groups and council of the monument's condition and the possible costs associated with repairs before a long-term decision is made. To summarize, if we were to leave the monument at its current location, we would still need to address the failing coating of the monument. To do that, we would need to move the monument to a dry, indoor, and controlled facility for a period of time so that a proper assessment can be done. If the decision to move the monument elsewhere permanently were to be made, we would still need to apply the same thought process as we would need to ascertain the monument's long-term needs. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that thorough report, Director Christie. I've got Councillor Littleton and Councillor Cisco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the director. Had we not passed the motion last July, would we have done an examination on the current condition?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we actually had the assessment scheduled for 2022 in our forecasted capital budget. So we're just moving it up 1 year.
Okay, and can I just ask, have the committees, all of these, committees, groups, you know, the Niagara Regional Native Center, the Métis National Council, have they responded at all? Have we engaged them at all to start talking to them about this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have not engaged them yet, and they did not reach to our office as of yet.
Okay, so I don't think we should do anything until we have, like we outlined in this report, we asked that staff consult with the groups of the removal of it, because what if everybody comes back and says, you know what, let's just put up a plaque somewhere else, and we've spent $70,000 to move a statue that's crumbling. I say leave it for now. Let's get the let's get the feedback from the groups, which is what we asked, and then we'll deal with everything else. I don't think we can spend $70,000 on a crumbling statue. I'm okay. I don't want to open this debate for everybody tonight, but I'm okay if it doesn't make it. Like maybe it's not going to make it. In this report that we've had, it seems like this thing has been falling apart for quite some time. And to spend $70,000 when we've got people, it's crazy. So sorry, I think it's irresponsible for us to do that, and I will absolutely not be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Councillor Cisco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Christie very explicitly stated what I was going to point out, and that is that if, and then Councillor Littleton went in a slightly different direction, but if there's any interest in either keeping this statue intact on the front lawn of City Hall or moving it somewhere else, the fact remains that money needs to be spent now to move it off of City Hall's lawn, at least for a year. And I thought the report, the 2019 report, was very instructive in that fact that it needs to be brought inside, it needs to be warm and climate controlled, and it needs to be dried out. I know I've received, and I'm sure the rest of council has received, a number of emails today from people who are saying we should leave it where it is and should not spend the money. But the impetus behind that in some cases was folks stating previously during this debate that they wanted to see the statue maintained on City Hall. If we leave it at City Hall, it's going to rot away. And if the goal is to preserve it, whether the goal is to preserve it at City Hall or at another location, it's irresponsible to leave it without bringing it inside and restoring it. So I think it really comes down to that. And I think Councillor Littleton's comments have actually crystallized what the decision today is. If we choose to not spend the $70,000, then council is choosing to allow that statue to crumble. That seems to be it. It's crumbling now. Anybody who has walked past that corner can see it crumbling and chunks falling off of it. And again, the two reports have very clearly demonstrated that. So I don't think this is a debate about whether we're moving the statue from City Hall or not. I think it's a debate tonight about whether we're allowing it to rot on the front lawn of City Hall or if we're going to remove it and try to restore it. Because I will point out, there is also a great deal of doubt, based on my reading of these reports, as to whether it can be properly restored. So there is a risk entailed here that if we move it and try to restore it, it will not be properly restored, no matter what's done. So I appreciate Mr. Christie being very explicit, and I appreciate Councillor Littleton's comments because I think she crystallized what tonight's debate is actually about.
Thank you, Councillor Cisco. I'll go with Councillor Garcia and then Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a clarification request to the clerk, if she could comment on this. The way, and Councillor Littleton brought this up already, the way I read the motion that we passed in July, I think is very clear that it says that a relocation strategy cannot be developed until after the stakeholder consultation. And whether it's just moving it inside or moving it somewhere else, we're moving it. So I don't think I think that's contrary to the motion. So I'm asking the clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I read both motions today prior to the meeting, and I believe that what Director Christie is proposing here is a step in the process that's been asked of him. And I believe he's saying that I think he's changed maybe the order, but I believe that this is a step in the process. So it's not a reconsideration. And I think he's saying that they will go to the groups once they know the condition when this is dry, unless I'm incorrect, and I would ask Director Christie to correct me.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, Bonnie, you're correct. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if that is the clerk's interpretation, then I would like to make a motion to defer this subject until such time as we have heard from the stakeholders and we got the report on what the stakeholders have to say.
So there's no motion on the floor right now. We're just discussing the report. So I'll come back to that once the questions of the report are done. Councillor Townsend, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, regardless of, obviously there's history with the statue. It goes back many years. However, the fact of the matter is that I believe it was 10 years ago that council looked at the statue, which was crumbling and falling apart then. Regardless, this statue is going to have to be looked at as it continues to disintegrate and fall apart. It's going to have to be moved at some point. My question, I have a question for Director Christie. It does say that we're looking to approve $70,000 from the infrastructure reserve levy, and that the way it's highlighted is that it's looking to come out of the tree budget. Can you just touch on that? Because my concern with this is that we've declared a climate emergency, and a few months back we were told at council that we haven't met our current canopy target goals. How would taking this funding out affect our tree canopy going forward?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor. The funding, first of all, as I mentioned earlier, this project has been moved up by about a year. And in doing so, we had to find the required funding to present this to you for debate. And in doing so, what we have done is we looked at our budget internal to our department and to see where we had unspent dollars related to projects in 2020. And because of COVID, largely because of COVID, we weren't able to spend all of the money that were allocated to the tree planting budget. We couldn't give away as many trees. We only had one tree giveaway. We couldn't plant as many trees because the contractor couldn't do the work. We couldn't stump as many trees. And again, because of COVID, we just couldn't find the contractors to do the work. The money that we have identified here is from a previous year's budget. It is not affecting the 2021 budget. We are very, very aware of the climate emergency that we're all facing, and we are committed to giving away more trees than ever before. If we learn one thing from COVID is that we can give away trees during a pandemic, and we had received many, many positive comments from folks who told us that, It was a great thing to do. It was an easy thing to do. So we would like to duplicate that at least twice this coming year. Similarly, we'd like to engage our contractor so that we can so that we can plant more trees than ever before and address those stumps that need to be taken out so that we can plant more trees. So our goal is not to divert from the overall goal of growing our canopy and reaching our overall canopy target. Our goal in identifying the dollars that we did was just to identify a bucket of money, if you will, a source of funding from within our own internal accounting, and that was from a previous year's budget. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, and thank you, Director Christie. And through the mayor, one more question I have is that with diverting this $70,000 away from that budget, will the city still be able to hit and maintain their canopy target goals going into 2021, late 2021?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So our annual budget for our tree planting program has not changed. The council has approved it every year, and we're very grateful for that. So yes, we are very, very confident that we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Councillor Williamson.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Mayor. I have spent a lot of time in the last, well, we had a nice long break since the last council meeting. So I've done a lot of research on the statute and what it has meant to the people of St. Catharines, because I'm quite concerned about the historical interpretations that we've had, that this was just that it represents just one soldier who lost his life in the Northwest Rebellion, and it didn't have meaning beyond that. And one of the things that, one of the artifacts that got me onto this was this incredible photograph from the turn of the century. Some of you have probably seen it. This is a group of Fenian raid veterans who were really disrespected after there's a battle in one of the Fenian raids is called the Battle of Ridgeway from June 1866. And of course, a year later, we had Confederation. And there's a book written by Peter Vransky who talks about how it was a seminal reason why we ended up coming together as a country, and local boys, including my great-great-grandfather, this chap right here, James Henry Williamson. That's his medal for participating at Ridgeway, and that's the burst from his pith helmet. I wish I had met him, or I wish I'd at least talked to my grandfather to learn more about him. But the story of these boys, and they represented really the first true Canadian soldiers, because in the War of 1812, we were still essentially a British colony. As you know, Mr. Mayor is also a passionate person on history. And so these were really the true first Canadians. It was a militia, they're citizen soldiers. Anyway, we had these Irish Republican Fenian raids, and these people, these young guys came and ultimately repulsed them from our country over a period from 1866 to 1871. And interestingly enough, one of these incursions actually happened in Manitoba, and the Fenians actually thought that Louis Riel and the Métis would side with them, but they didn't. They took the side of Canada, and also helped to prevent these kinds of things happening. Anyway, to get to my point is we need to, if we're going to be honest about truth and reconciliation and take a full look at history, we can't just slough off the fact that this particular statue served as a city cenotaph, our war memorial. De facto, yes, it was for Private Alexander Watson, but it became used practically, and every Decoration Day, by the way, Decoration Day is June the 2nd, and it's June the 2nd because it's in commemoration of the Battle of Ridgeway. It was celebrated, it was effectively our Remembrance Day until after World War I. And included in those citizen soldiers, of course, are Métis and First Nations people. So we have to honor their service as well. And I mean, if you know the history of Indigenous people service in World War I and World War II, it's simply remarkable. And they serve probably in terms of any one single group, there were represented more than just about, like I said, any other group. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit off track. I do get passionate about it. But my concern is when I read in this report from the person that there wasn't that many local connections and it doesn't have that much historical significance. I got to take exception with that. This thing represented a whole bunch of different historical perspectives. It was very important place for commemoration, remembrance for 45 years from 1886 until the current cenotaph was completed in 1927. So I just want to make sure that we're talking about this. We're doing some inclusive history. We're taking all the perspectives of it, and that's the gist of that, I guess. I do have a couple questions for Director Christie. In terms of the testing on site that they've done, and I read the report and I've looked at the statue close up, and it talks about hairline fractures, and we're talking about this coating that they put on it in 1971 peeling off. So did they do x-rays of it? Like, what kind of physical testing have they done so far to tell us that in fact it's crumbling? We were told 10 years ago that it was crumbling, and we probably didn't think it was going to last this long, but it's stood the test of time so far, although I'm under any illusion that it's in great shape. Sorry, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not exactly sure as to what kind of in-depth testing has been conducted on the monument. What we have been informed is that the coating is failing in certain spots. And at this time, I guess with the level of assessment that they have conducted, they're uncertain as to how far it reaches and how wide the damage has spread. And that's why they want to bring it indoors and let it dry out. So, but I do not believe, Councillor Williamson, that they have done any X-ray type of assessments on the monument. Certainly, we haven't hired them to do that in the last couple of years. So maybe before that, maybe older technology was used, but I'm not really sure as to what was done.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Littleton started us off with talking about the fact that we're always better to have more consultation, and Councillor Garcia, and I think Councillor Cisco as well. That was sort of the intention. To me, if we start dissecting this and loading it onto cranes and that kind of stuff, there's going to be no hope for it ever returning, and the historical significance of a structure in good part is where it's been located, and this has been there for 136 years, visible to well, in my family, and I'm reflective of a lot of other family. The one branch of my family goes back, a lot of generations. So it was something that they used, and I just don't want to see us pretend that this doesn't have historical significance, because it does to a lot of people, including our Indigenous folks. Anyway, I guess I'm a little bit, I'm somewhat emotional about it. I'm not sentimental about my family connection to it, but I think it represents a lot of other families' connection as well. And I think if we ignore the fact that this was a solemn place of remembrance and commemoration for 45 years before we had to have our current cenotaph. I mean, we would never dream of relocating our current cenotaph. Back in that 2009 report, part of the decision was made to prioritize our spending on the main cenotaph on Port Dalhousie and Meriton. And thanks to the great work of Ms. Khan and Kathleen Powell, they were done right. And Phil, I don't know when you came on the scene, but we know that they're going to be around for a long time. This one, I understand it's in dire circumstances.
You got your 10 minutes, Councillor. So
yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am concerned though of the intended consequences if we start lopping this thing off. That it's going to create more damage than what we think it'll do. Thank you.
Okay, a lot to unpackage there. I'll have my remarks at the end. Councillor Miller?
Yeah, that was great. I'm certainly jealous of the students at Lower Seacourt. I think that was my first Teacher Williamson moment. I think the thing is, we should remember this: the statute doesn't commemorate the defeating of the Fenians, and that it does commemorate the crushing of an Indigenous rebellion against the colonial policies of the federal government. But I think what this highlights more than anything is that we want to understand more about its significance and what it means. We've heard a lot about the negative feelings people have towards it because of its commemoration of crushing the Riel Rebellion. It's certainly open to the idea that there's positive associations as well. So I think that's why we asked for so much consultation, and I think it would be premature to do anything until those happen. And I guess to the point that, well, if we don't do anything, it could disintegrate in the year while we do consultations. Certainly that's a risk I'm willing to take because I think they are that important. I don't want to spend $70,000 and then find out no one wants this thing anywhere. So I would certainly be in favor when the motion's on the floor of deferring it until those consultations happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not in favor of spending $70,000 in our community, especially with during COVID, and especially that we would be taking it out of the tree budget. But the $70,000 is only the beginning. So we spend $70,000, we move it, we dry it out, and then we have another examination of it, and that'll be another $50,000, $70,000. So we're talking about a lot of money here. And we have the community divided. Some people find it very offensive. Then others are saying it's part of our history and it should not be moved. So my opinion is leave it and wait until it falls apart. And then at that time, remove it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Councillor Kushner, thank you. Councillor Porter.
Thank you. I think this is really challenging through you, Mr. Mayor. We did vote as a council to remove this statue altogether. I think it was a unanimous vote of council. And I agree with some of the comments. I think the statue is, important to some people. It is not important to other people, and it's also offensive to some other people. I don't support the idea of leaving it to rot. I think that's what's been done forever, and I don't think that's a solution. We have heard that it is, it needs to be studied further, and it is important to some people. It's just, where's the right place for it? We still don't have the answer to that question. I think just deferring this is still doing nothing, which is what has been done on this statute for a really long time. I don't feel that there's any other good solution than what has been proposed by city staff. I think it's an excellent solution. If this statute is important to some on council, we will put the money towards drying it out, figuring out its condition, and then deciding as a community what should be done with it in proper consultation with all of the organizations that were in the motion. I still think that that's going to happen. I think deferring this and letting it rot on City Hall is not what we voted on before, and I don't think that's what the community wanted. So I think this is a good balance of everybody's feedback in the community. So that's my piece on that. Thank you to staff for doing this work and letting us know what the condition of the statue is.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Porter. So it is a good report. I think the staff did a good job of trying to address the heritage piece that Councillor Williamson and Councillor Garcia talk about, in terms of, if you want to preserve heritage, sometimes you've got to get it to a place where not only can it be examined, but there's an opportunity to reinforce and reestablish it. Without doing the step, from a heritage perspective, you're allowing the elements to continue to chip away, if you will, at the structure itself, which from a heritage perspective, I don't know how responsible that is. But again, if you're a heritage person, then you may want to see this get to a place where it can be properly dried out and examined. So I'd be surprised about why you wouldn't want to protect this if it does have that heritage value in the community that you proclaim it does. Now, in terms of the actual history, it is fascinating. And it's fascinating because if this was a German soldier who participated in the extermination of Jewish people, and you were sitting here making a decision, and this statue was in Germany, I wonder how many of you would sit here and say, well, that is a part of our community and it's a part of our history. And I say that because the individual who fought in that battle was, yes, following the direction of government, but was doing it to exterminate a people, to take their land. You think that's fair? Because I don't think it's fair. So when people try to put a settler's perspective on something like that and claim it for something else, be careful about what you're teaching. Because that is something that we all have to look at and own. If we were in Germany and that was a statue of someone who participated in the extermination of a culture, you would say remove it. Full stop. So what I'm saying is if you want to save it from a heritage perspective, you examine it, take it off. What it stands for in a community, understand the historic element of it. It was an individual who, yes, fought under government direction for the essence of destroying another culture. You think that should be at City Hall? Call the question.
Going to pull the motion up.
Councillor Garcia, you've got a deferral you want to put on the floor? Councillor Garcia, do you have a deferral you would like to put on the floor?
It's perfectly written the way Evan has it there. So I would like to move to defer until staff reports back to council with the results of its consultation with the groups identified in the motion on July 27th, 2020.
Okay, so moved. So recorded vote.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
No.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
On the deferral. Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
No.
Councillor Cisco.
No.
Councillor Sorrento. Councillor Sorrento, are you there?
I don't see his name.
Okay. There he is. Councillor Sorrento, yes or no?
Sorry, I voted yes for the deferral.
Councillor Townsend.
No.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Mayor Sendzik.
No.
And that's carried.
All right, thank you for that. 3.4, which is corporate services, human resources. Councillor Kushner, you do have a motion that you brought forward. We do have Director Pilateri and I believe Don Lalonde with us as well. I mean, Don, I forget his last name. Reedon, sorry. There's a couple of Dons in my life, so I'm trying to balance them out. So I'll turn it over to Director Pilateri just to provide an quick overview, and then we'll go to Councillor Kushner's motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. The report before you is with regards to the recent announcement from our current CAO, Shelley Kemnitz, with her intention to retire effective July 2021 this year. This report is essentially looking forward to our next steps. As the CAO reports directly to City Council, selection and approving the successful candidate is the responsibility of Council, and staff are seeking several recommendations as outlined in this report. We are looking that Council approve the establishment of a Chief Administration Officer Recruitment and Selection Task Force as a special task committee of Council. We are looking to have Council approve the terms of reference, that also Council approve that these meetings happen in camera as per Municipal Act. And also we are looking for the appointments of the councillors that would be sitting on this task force. Attached in the report is the actual terms of reference that we had our manager, Don Breeden, just as we mentioned earlier on, he is in attendance this evening, who could speak to the establishment in the details of this report with you if that is desired at this time. So Mr. Mayor, I'll ask you how you'd like us to proceed.
Okay, so we have Councillor Kushner who brought forward a motion. The reason being is that there were a number of councillors who wanted to sit on the committee. I think we were up to 7. Councillor Kushner has made the recommendation that we could have this as a special meeting of council, which would include all of us. And then that would carry us through to a certain point in time per se. But this would allow council to participate in the stages of moving towards hiring a CAO. So Councillor Kushner, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion is by myself and the seconder is Bill Phillips. And I understand that there are 9 or 10 people that are interested in being on the committee. And what we're suggesting is that, in a sense, it be the committee of the whole. And that way, everybody would have an opportunity to contribute. And the procedure would be very similar to what we did with the budget this year. That is, had a budget committee, which was the committee of the whole. And so the motion would be exactly the same as the staff recommendation, with the exception of the first sentence. And that would read, I could summarize that special meetings of council be held for the purpose of recruiting the city's CAO, and then the rest remains the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Councillor Phillips, you got a comment to that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I totally agree with the motion that's in front of us by Councillor Kushner. We did this the last time we hired a CAO. In our last interview process, we had all of council participate, and obviously that turned out wonderfully. And we also went to committee of the whole on budget with our budget this year, and I heard a lot of very positive comments from councillors at that time about the fact it was open, it was transparent, and a lot of good input was given. So I think this is the way to go in this situation. And the fact that we are in a pandemic situation is going to be totally different than what we've had in the past. I think I've been on every CAO hiring since, well, for the last 15 years. And it was somewhat arduous, but I think it's going to have to be a little different this time, perhaps. And I think all of council should be part of the decision-making process. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Councillor Phillips. Appreciate that. So this would be a committee of the whole, reduces the need to have a vote and such. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are we able to ask Director Pelletieri questions on the proposed terms of reference? I assume they would apply whether we go to the committee of the whole route or not?
Yes, you are correct.
Okay. So through you, just a couple of questions looking at the terms of reference. I wasn't quite clear. We talked about having an internal search versus including an external search. And my question is, are there any legal requirements that we essentially post this job and make it open to anybody in the public?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the terms of reference that are presented to you this evening was based on best practices. So as the report mentions, it was based in the best practices were based on findings from the Ontario Municipal Administrators Association and the Ontario Municipal Human Resource Association. So what we have before us is that we have options, and it sounds like there's a direction that council is going. With regards to how we move forward, I do not see any requirement for us to, like a legal requirement for us to post in any particular way. It would be what would be best and a decision made through this task, the committee of a whole, and how we want to move forward. So I think if we were to have those meetings, we can go through the the positives and negatives of doing or not doing or taking certain actions.
Thank you very much. And just one more quick question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the director. The terms of reference talk about the task force, if that's what it had been, creating a job description for this job. Is there now not a current job description that we would work from, or there isn't one?
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. Of course, we have a current job description. So what we would do is we present that to council. Council would have an opportunity. We'd be in dialogue with you. Human Resource would be in dialogue with you into if we needed to update or amend any of the job requirements in that posting. And we would bring forward to you our best presentation of what that job description should look like in the current situation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. And seeing no further questions, I'll ask the call for vote.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller. Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Miller. And Mayor Senzik.
Councillor Miller, just give a thumbs up again. There, Councillor Miller's thumbs up.
Thank you.
Thumbs up too.
And for all those in the room, it's a unanimous vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Council. And we don't have to go through the vote there, which is fantastic. So this is just a 3.5 appointment to the BIA. Councillor Cisco put his name up for consideration. I don't think there are any other names being put up for consideration. So we'll just have a vote there. To the mover and a seconder, can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Porter, Councillor Townsend. Okay, and we'll just have a vote.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
It would look pretty bad if I voted no, so I'll just say yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
He's got thumbs up.
Thank you. Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
And Mayor Senzik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
I would just like to thank Councillor Sorrento for being in that role for the last year. He stepped up when they were going through some very tumultuous times, and he did a very good job of trying to coordinate, which was some difficult conversations. And it was a tough position to be in, but I think Councillor Sorrento handled it very well. So thank you for your contributions there, Councillor Sorrento.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, number 10, we have a motion to ratify forthwith recommendations that council adopt those items approved forthwith by the General Committee Monday, January 18th, 2021. Councillor Williamson, can you move that? And
yes.
Councillor Phillips, you're next. Can you second it? Okay, and all in favor, show of hands. Okay, that's carried. Okay, we move on to some motions. We do have some motions. Councillor Miller, you're up first, 11.1. Your mic thing's not working. Okay, you climb back in. If you speak again, Greg. Yeah, you climb back in. Here's the only motion. Can you go off and come back in? Are there any notices of motion for next? If you have any notices of motion, please send them into council to the clerk's office. We'll just see if this.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, sorry, technical difficulties. The battery on these iPads isn't what they used to be, so I had to charge it. And then anyway, that's neither here nor there. So this motion follows a motion of the City of Ottawa passed. You can read it there. It's basically, as we learned tonight, that the ramifications and the penalties for what you can do with integrity commissioner complaints is pretty limited. So this is to ask the province to allow us to go up to and including the removal of a colleague for egregious acts, obviously far above and beyond anything we discussed tonight. Specific in Ottawa, it was related to a councillor sexually harassing both staffers and potential job candidates in his office. And unfortunately, the council doesn't have the power to remove. So this is just simply to ask the province to grant that power. And just to be clear, this would follow the integrity commissioner. This wouldn't be come to council to settle political scores. It would, just like tonight, to have a non-biased and expertise from an integrity commissioner like Mr. Mascarin, who would have to recommend this first. So that's what I'm asking for, to throw our support behind the City of Ottawa's motion asking the province.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I got Councillor Kushner, you're up. You want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I get clarification of paragraph 2? I thought there was a way and means to have a member of council's seat vacated.
To the clerk's office?
I would need a moment, and I would also ask Shondor if he has any information he can help us with, but I'll check the municipal acts. I'll need a moment though. I
can jump in. There is no, like, you can be charged with trafficking cocaine, which has happened in Ontario, and you still hold your seat.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, if I may comment, I know there was a big issue over a regional councillor a couple of years back where people would have liked to have him removed, and my understanding is that you say there is no way for doing that.
And that's how I know, because someone had to come to council and explain to us why we can't remove them. Good point, Councillor. All right, Councillor Kushner, you're stop.
Yes, I'm in favor, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Townsend and Councillor Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I guess, to Councillor Miller. Obviously, there is different levels of harassment. We've seen what we've discussed tonight, an incident. I guess it's just a matter of the definition of harassment and to what level. I can kind of get an idea, but can you kind of just touch on your goal with this motion?
Sure. To be clear, it's not really harassment. The key word is in the second paragraph, or phrase is serious misconduct. And obviously that is can be open to interpretation, but that interpretation will be done by legal experts like Mr. Mascarin. I think obviously sustained and regular sexual harassment, as we saw in the case of Ottawa, certainly fits that. I would expect that trafficking cocaine would probably fit serious misconduct as well. So we're talking about big, serious, and oftentimes what would be criminal acts for the most part when we talk about serious misconduct.
Okay, thank you. Through the mayor, I guess my further question, this would obviously include online harassment too. For instance, say if a councillor or an elected official, or I guess our council, would go online and say something just awful, would that kind of fall into this situation as well, where they would be removed from their seat?
I mean, I can't comment on that. I think the situation Mayor Senzik alluded to with last regional council and the one before, where you had an unrepentant and serial online abuse from an elected official, that, we're probably looking at that, a one-off statement. I wouldn't expect I'm sure Mr. Mascarin, I don't want to speak for him, wouldn't recommend removal on strike one for something like that.
Okay, I guess it's the wording, I guess, that I understand where you're going with the motion. I support it. It's the language that it's kind of there's a little bit of it's open to. I think we need more stronger language and more specific language. If that can I get the I guess legal to jump in here?
Shandor?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at the page. I'm reading it. Well, the issue that I'm looking at, through you, Mr. Mayor, is that the Municipal Act has a very exhaustive list of qualification of disqualification of council member. I mean, one of the examples is that you would have to give up Canadian citizenship or literally be incarcerated. So coming up with a better verbiage for this, previously to hold a higher standard. Direct mayor and concerned the city clerk, city solicitor to write to the Honorable State Minister of Municipal Affairs for vacating of seat of member council who's been found clear and convincing evidence. I mean, obviously, we would have to sit down and try to come up with the best language there is, but we would always have to circle back to the Municipal Act and perhaps the Municipal Elections Act and see what the language is. I mean, I can always go and look at the legislation and try to come up with a better language, but right now I don't really have anything to tweak this up.
Okay, thank you. And I see where the motion is going. I just think that it leaves open there's some misinterpretation that could be made with serious misconduct, because what really defines serious misconduct? Does this open a door for anything to be considered a serious misconduct? As our solicitor here has just even has said that there's a lot of meat in the Municipal Act that can lead us to being, what is the definition there of serious misconduct? And I think that this might need to be referred to legal before approving any type of motion like this. I understand where the councillor is going with it. I like it, but it's the language that I'm concerned with, and it's the definition behind what serious misconduct would include.
Okay. Councillor Townsend, that was finished?
Yeah, and I guess I can't make the referral because I've spoken to it.
Right.
Thank you.
Councillor Littleton, you're up.
I share, so apologies to my ward mate, but I share the same concerns because I don't know how, and I don't think that, maybe I'm wrong, Councillor Miller, you're not trying to quantify or I don't even know the word. I do know the word. I'm just tired. Define what serious misconduct is. But I'm thinking back, even when we saw behavior, for example, from the late Rob Ford, even that behavior, the man had a drug addiction. So I would hate to, I would rather see a council step in like they did, remove him so he could get treatment, have the compassion that he could go get the treatment and come back and serve, and I'm not a huge fan. I wasn't a huge fan of Mr. Ford at all, but I would just be really cautious about that. If one of my colleagues started to act in such a bizarre manner, I would rather that we take the time to try and find out what's going on. My other concern is just for councillors. We've just heard how expensive legal counsel can be, and I'd be afraid if someone was behaving in what Councillor X felt was or had committed serious misconduct according to Councillor X, and Councillor Y has to go and hire counsel to defend them. They're 20,000 in the hole, and then it's found that no, actually their behavior was okay by whatever definition it is, and that family now is in serious financial straits. So I guess I'm echoing Councillor Townsend, but unless this is super clear on what's going on, I feel like this is just opening a whole can of worms where the intention is really great, but I can just see it misused so much. So I'm sorry, in its current form, I can't support it.
Just one quick point of clarification. We're not seeking to rewrite our code of conduct tonight. We are asking the province to include this. And, you know, I think we can all presume that they would define this pretty clearly. And certainly if we were to rewrite our code of conduct, that we would as well.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Sorrento.
Motion to refer, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, refer it where? Just so that there's direction.
I'd refer it back to staff for clarification.
Okay, so clarification that you're looking for?
Clarification of the terms that council has just been discussing.
I'll look to the clerk. Is that clear?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is not a staff motion. So when he's saying refer it to staff for clarification, it would need to be Councillor Miller's clarification, I suppose, or refer it to, are you saying refer it to legal for an opinion about what it means?
Refer,
sure.
Mr. Mayor, to refer to legal as to what it means, and specifically incomprehensible incidents of harassment. The same points that Councillor Porter and Councillor Townsend were speaking to. That's what I'd like to refer, Mr. Mayor, to staff if I can.
Yep. Okay. You're making a referral for clarification.
Or to define the terms, Mr. Mayor, because there's been a discussion about it, not speaking to it, just speaking to the referral, just to get it to legal, to define incomprehensible incidents of harassment.
Okay. Okay. It'll be hard for staff to do that because I don't think there's anything in the codes that would give them that. But I think what you're looking for is have the clerks come back with, you know, what steps would be required for the Municipal Act to be updated to include the provision that's being asked by Councillor Miller.
We can certainly do some of that in terms of the process to open a municipal act.
Maybe that'll give us, maybe that'll provide better direction as to in terms of as we approach AMO and other bodies that would be provincial in nature. That would be, so if that's your referral, then at least staff have something to work on.
I think that'll suffice, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, and thank you for the help to the clerk and to you. That'll suffice.
All right. So you can't speak to it. No, it's a referral. So can we just do a show of hands on this one? Okay, that's carried. Thanks, Council. Greatly appreciated. We're on the home stretch, folks. So we got a couple of report requests that are coming. Councillor Miller, you got a report request for loitering?
Yeah, just asking staff about what steps we would need to take in order to repeal and review our city's and update our city's loitering bylaws, which my understanding is we don't really enforce all that often, but it's been highlighted as something that's inequitable, unnecessarily punishes people living rough and people who've been intentionally dehoused.
Okay. And then Councillor Townsend, you've got one on discarded.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's quite straightforward there. We've been dealing with some shopping cart issues, specifically in St. George's Ward, and we've been working with staff, and we're asking to come up with some alternative solutions to hold some financial responsibility to the big box stores and some of the retailers around the neighborhood. It's been an ongoing issue, and quite frankly, city staff have been putting a lot of time and effort into picking up some of these carts. So we're just trying to come up with a an alternative game plan here to find a better approach here.
Okay. Okay, so motion to approve the 2 staff reports is on the table. And just show of hands in terms of moved by Councillor Sorrento, seconded by Councillor Phillips. All in favor? Carried. Okay, thank you for that. We got reading of bylaws. That the bylaws be listed on council agenda A through G be read at first time, considered and passed, and that they be signed and executed by the mayor and city clerk. Councillor Sorrento, can you move that?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Townsend. Okay, all in favor, show of hands. That's carried. Okay, ABCs, we have a motion from the advisory committees of council, and that the file and receive the minutes. Councillor Cisco, can you move that? Seconded by Councillor Littleton. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, we have 15.2, which is motion rising for the minutes of the Surplus Lands Task Force. And we have a motion that council direct the Surplus Land Task Force to review the Queen Elizabeth Center, 2 Facer Street, and the Robertson School, 85 Church Street properties, and the staff be directed to prepare information regarding the use of these buildings, age of the buildings, and any partnerships and users in the buildings. Can I have a...
I'll move it, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sorrento, seconded by Councillor Phillips. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that's carried. And then 15.3, report request for minutes from the social sustainability pillar. We have a motion that council request a report from staff on the current protections in place to deal with harassment directed at the mayor and members of council, and the resources that would be required to provide further support to the mayor and members of council who are subjected to harassment, intimidation, and threats. And I have Councillor Phillips making that motion.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
That was actually included in the motion from earlier this evening.
Okay, I'll look to the clerk just in terms of clarification of the motion as it's here. Where did it come from?
Yes, we pulled it from, through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Cisco is correct. There may be a little bit of words that are slightly different in here, but I would cross-reference both of them. It is almost identical, verbatim.
So we'll scratch that. Thank you, Councillor
Yes.
Cisco. We do have another one, 15.4, which came from the social sustainability pillar meeting. We have a motion that council directs staff to produce a report on amending facility and design standards, FADs, in the following sections. Section 4.27, universal washrooms, that a lift and lift ceiling track be provided in all universal washrooms, and that takes the user from the change table to the toilet within that universal washroom where possible. That at least one universal washroom be provided in all public buildings and assembly buildings, in addition to any accessible public use, common use toilet, regardless of the number of common or public use washroom facilities containing toilets. And at 4.5.2, recreation facilities outdoors, playgrounds, that a paved pathway be made of hard, smooth surfaces, materials that do not separate under pressure, connect playgrounds to the main sidewalk and our parking lot or main access area for that play space, thereby creating an accessible route. So this is good work coming from the social sustainability. And who's the councillor on that? Councillor Phillips, is that your pillar?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm the chair of that one. And Councillor Sorrento and Councillor Miller are with me on that.
All right, so I'll take Councillor Sorrento as your second of the motion. Great work from the committees that are working on that. And a motion to approve. Show of hands. That's carried. Great job. And I will leave the adjournment for 2 of the councillors that will be jacked up all week, if you will. And that will be who wants to. I gave Councillor Miller, you do this, the motion. Am I getting some hands from another? Because I'm only starting to see one councillor bring out their winter jacket and say that they were at a bunch of games. But I always see Councillor Miller and Councillor Cisco with some kind of paraphernalia that relate to something. So Councillor Cisco, if you put that helmet on your head, you can make the motion. Oh, it fits too. Look at that.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councillor Garcia.
sorry, are you adjourning the meeting? Is that what you
Yes.
said? I thought we had reports from board updates.
Yeah, we're gonna do that. We're gonna do that at the next meeting.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. All right, and Councillor Miller, you're seconding that? Okay, well, all in favor? Go Bills, go. Keep believing. Yeah, he's got a mug. Okay, that's good. You got a mug. I saw it. All right, take care, folks. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.